Hello and welcome back to Brothers of the Arcana. As always, I am Alex Aldea.
I am co-host Dave Ferrigno.
And with us today we have, again, Brother Eric Mattson. Eric is, as you know, an astrophysicist and a guy who is, well, really needs no introduction since he's already been on the show. But it's a pleasure to have you here, my friend.
Pleasure's all
and
mine.
Thank you for being and agreeing to be on with us this afternoon.
I thought it was being held against my will.
Well, a little bit. And we started the year with Eric, and we're finishing 2024 with Eric.
That's right. This is our last show of 2024,
That's a good
which
point.
is exciting. And Dave is so excited that he got dressed up today. And he's got cufflinks on, guys. Cufflinks.
He's
Can you
looking
imagine?
good. He's looking
Look
good.
at that. Look at that. And,
Masonic cufflinks, no less.
Masonic cufflinks, absolutely.
Can't beat it.
No. And as everyone knows, we do keep the Martians on their reps.
We try anyway.
Yes.
Good luck with that.
I don't know. That's what they said on The Simpsons.
They know it all.
But absolutely. So, thank you for coming back on the show. We sort of feel, and we had a lot of fans actually ask for Eric to come back because we had a lot of unanswered questions or questions we kind of wanted to follow up on, get some more understanding of. So, I know last time we talked about zones of avoidance. We talked about a lot about the Black Manta.
Yes.
And other things of that kind. So just a lot of interesting thoughts. And you have one that you started about the Knights Templars, right? So
Absolutely.
maybe we could dive right into that and start us off with that if you don't mind.
I would love to.
Since it's top of mind already, something you've been working on, and just let the folks know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, excellent. I have been working on a new presentation that I'm doing on the beginning of the Knights Templar. You can ask that question to a lot of people. You might get a lot of different answers, but it seems like, at least from my experience, that a lot of people don't really know. Because
So let's lay a little bit of groundwork on what the Knights Templar are or aren't, so
Great
people
point.
can get a sense. Right now, there's about 500 different organizations that all tout themselves as being Knights Templar organizations. Everything from ones with actual historical basis to just shyster organizations that are looking to, make some money on this whole fad. One of our friends and friends of the show, Tim Hogan, is a Grand Master of one such Templar order.
shout out to Tim. Yep.
Absolutely, the OTSI, and very interesting. And we chatted about him a little bit. And obviously, you know Tim,
Of course.
and we've chatted with him. We loved him, as well as Scott Walder, who found the Kensington Runestone that relates to the Knights Templar. And maybe we'll chat about that in a little bit.
Decks, yeah.
But the original Knights Templar were founded as what, the Poor Knights of Christ.
The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of
There you
the
go.
Temple of Solomon. Yep.
So, and their mandate was to safeguard pilgrims in the Holy Land. The movement there,
Eventually,
back and forth.
yeah, with the Vatican or the Church, eventually called them in as monastic monk order who would protect the pilgrims on their journey from wherever they were coming from, usually France, to the Holy Land in Jerusalem. So again, I look back into the beginning of it. So where did this all start from? Why did they decide to create a monastic order, or not even a monastic order, but an order of knights that would protect those that couldn't protect themselves? What I did find in some of my research, which is usually, I guess, the most prevalent that I've discovered, is Hugh DePaynes, who
One of the original founders.
one of the original
Yes,
founders.
Yes.
He spent some time in what we now call, what is it? Timbuktu is Constantinople, right? So Constantinople in Turkey, right?
I'm glad you got
It's a good
there
way to
via
remind it.
song,
Remember
but
it, yeah.
okay, fair
Yes,
enough.
exactly.
So Constantinople, he spent some time over there, a few years apparently.
Okay.
And he met this group called the Brothers of the East.
Oh, okay. So this is very interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the Brothers of the East were an order of brothers that had very specific morals, ethics, and values, and held themselves to such high regards to make sure that the good life prevailed. And so when Hugh DePaynes was there, he gained their trust. Again, this is theoretical.
When you mean the good life, what do you mean by that?
Morals, ethics, and values, being a good person.
Oh, I see.
Making sure that those that can't care for themselves, you can care for them, help them out, so on and so forth. The way that life should be on this planet, and unfortunately it isn't. I mean, I've said that enough to both of you, of course. But,
Right.
So Hugh DePayne's gained their trust, stayed with them for, I believe it was 3 to 5 years. It's a little cloudy on that as far as the historical accuracy is. But he was there for years, and what he learned from them, he gained their trust. He learned that they had what is described in the research that I found, that they had these superior moral ethics and values that they held themselves by. And on top of that, they had ancient technology or devices that seemed like magic to Hugh DePayne. And that's the only way to describe it in a pre-scientific world. And so he was mystified by it. And
Did they give any examples of these devices? What they might have been or looked like? Or
not really, to an extent. It was basically the way that the Brothers of the East were portrayed in my research is that they had these ancient technologies and values and knowledge from a ancient community of people, a lost civilization, if you will. And so basically what we call them today is the Atlanteans, right?
okay.
So
So
the Atlanteans.
I'm not sure that's what it was called or whatnot, but that's the way that we describe it today.
Okay.
Sure.
And so they had this ancient knowledge from this lost civilization that was technologically advanced. They had devices from that as well. And so by time Hugh DePayne was there for, we'll say 3 years at least, gained their trust, and he welcomed Hugh DePayne into their inner circle and started discussing what all this stuff was. The morals, ethics, and values, why it's important, the ancient technology that they had, and the stuff that they found, which was basically handed down to them from generations after generations. And so Hugh DePayne, after gaining all this knowledge, the Brothers of the East apparently disclosed to him a location where more of this ancient technology and knowledge could be found. Which in the Brothers of the East description was in Jerusalem under the Temple Mount.
Interesting.
So you're talking about a vault now, or something like a
Well,
vault.
yeah, okay. Yeah, we can, I mean, that's eventually where it goes to, yes.
Because the only reason I say that is both Scott Walder and Tim have said that, throughout the world, apparently there are a bunch of vaults.
Okay.
And including one up in Montana. Oak Island was one
Oak
such
Island.
vault.
Interesting, okay.
Previously.
The one that was in France for Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
Sure.
Rennes de Chateau.
That's it.
Yeah. And so on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're talking hundreds, or not hundreds of years, but decades prior to the Knights Templar or the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. This is prior to that. So apparently the Brothers of the East described to Hugh DePayne where to find more ancient technology that comes from this ancient civilization that was lost to human history. And that was located in Jerusalem under the Temple Mount. So he goes back and he starts to create this group of men who were like-minded, share this knowledge that he had gained and attained from the Brothers of the East in Constantinople, and share it with like-minded people. And they eventually became what we call now the poor fellow soldiers of Christ in the Temple of Solomon. Temple of Solomon being the Temple Mount, which is where you could find more of this ancient technology.
Sure.
So initially, the poor fellow soldiers would protect, communities that couldn't protect themselves for free. They would do it just because it was the right thing to do. And at the end of these battles where they protected some of these communities, the communities would give them whatever they could. Gold, riches, horses, whatever. And they never asked for it, but they were given it to them.
Sure.
And so eventually they accrued a vast amount of wealth in certain types of ways: horses, stables, whatever, farms, so on and so forth. And eventually they accrued so much that they didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
So now this is kind of where the King of France, and who was friends with Pope Clemente, right? So Pope Clemente V became Pope after the previous Pope had passed away.
Usually the case.
Yeah. And so the King of France was friends with Pope Clemente V when they were younger. And once the King of France, King Philip, became the King of France, he basically whispered in his ear, like, I will give you the position as long as we are, in agreement that, you do for me, I do for you, one hand washes the other type thing. Eventually, they found these poor fellow soldiers. They saw how much they were doing for the community, how much that society, valued them. They were getting all this wealth for not even asking for it. They were just being given to them. And they came to the conclusion that there's this problem that where the pilgrims are trying to, attain passage to the Holy Land, and they were being raped and pillaged and robbed and all that stuff. And so Pope Clemente V, at the advice of King Philip, warranted the use of the poor fellow soldiers, which comes from the First Crusades.
I think you're off on your timeline there, dude.
So then tell me, yes, please.
Philip the Fair and Pope Clement V are the ones who destroyed the Templars.
Well, yes, eventually. That's where it ends up going, yes.
Well, okay.
But I thought the Templars originated a couple hundred years
way
before
earlier than that.
Was it hundreds of years?
It was hundreds of years.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say at first.
Hugh the Pains is in the 1100s.
Yeah.
Yes, and then 1300s
is where it ends.
So you might be right. So it might be, was it Clemente the First then?
I don't know.
I don't have my research.
It was Clemenza, the guy who said that
leave the gun, take the cannolis.
Yeah.
He made him an offer they couldn't refuse.
Fair enough. Okay, so they hire them as a monastic order of monks to protect the pilgrims to be carried down to Jerusalem after being raped and pillaged and robbed. And the fact that the poor fellow soldiers had already established their wealth, knowing to basically create an IOU. So you're carrying a piece of paper that you're going to carry from one place to the Holy Land, so you don't have goods and whatnot with you, so you don't get raped, pillaged, and robbed.
Right.
So that's kind of where I guess the theory of the Knights Templar creating the first banking system comes from.
Yeah.
So now the first time that they are ordered to take these pilgrims to Jerusalem or the Holy Land, they stay there for quite some time. Now this reaches back to the Brothers of the East and the beginning of the Poor Fellow Soldiers. So theoretically in the research, Hugh de Paynes takes a group down there and they stay there for, 7 years?
7 or 15, I forget exactly.
It was quite a long time. And what are they doing down there, right? A lot of the research spells that they were digging down. We can get into the Well of Souls and the Vault and so on and so forth.
That I want to hear more about because I don't know all that much. So apparently, as I see it here, they were founded by Hugh de Paynes under the auspices of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux.
Yeah.
They were founded about 1119.
That's it.
And they closed up shop in 1312.
Fair enough. After the Friday the 13th and all that, right? Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
that's
which
where,
was after King Philip IV of France.
With Pope Clemente V, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, there you go. I know you're still doing your research on that.
I am. I'm still completing it. It is very fascinating, some of the stuff that I've found. And again, so when they first went there, they were there, I believe it was 7 years, but it might have been longer.
Okay.
And in my opinion, from the research I've done, they were digging down looking for what Hugh de Payne was told was there. Now they establish a group of Templars in the Holy Land, and now they're going back and forth, bringing the pilgrims back to Jerusalem. But the initial reason that they were there for the 7 years, either digging down or establishing themselves in that region, that's where, there's not a lot of historical context of what they were doing while they were there.
Okay, so Tim Hogan talks about the fact that he thinks that they were there to recover lost artifacts, Scott Walder too, including the bones of Jesus.
So I was about to get into that.
Yeah. So you corroborate that, or what
so
you've seen?
From the research that I've found, when they were digging down looking for what the Brothers of the East told Hugh de Paynes to go find, one of the artifacts was the Ark of the Covenant, of course, right? That's obviously in the text of theories and whatnot of what the Knights Templar were there for.
Okay.
On top of that, they found an ossuary, which I believe Scott also spoke about on your show. So in my research, what I found
not just one, but a lot.
Yeah,
or a fair amount.
Yeah. So the ossuary that I discovered in my research that seems to have the most relevance in this entire context and story was they found the bones of Mary Magdalene. They found the bones of John the Baptist. they found the bones of Mary Magdalene and John the Baptist's child.
Right.
Then they also found the bones, which is going to be very controversial, of Jesus Christ, as well as the bones of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene's child. And that's something that obviously could put the church in jeopardy with the bones of Jesus, the bones of John, and, they're either legitimate or illegitimate children, and so on and so forth. And so, again, in the research, this is a little bit of a stretch, but if you find out as being the Pope that they have the means to, invalidate what you're saying is the coming of Jesus Christ, the raising, then his bones shouldn't exist, so on and so forth. And so that, I think, contributed towards the eventual disassemblement of the Knights Templar, where the Crusades against them was started. That's just a part of it, right? The other part is apparently the Knights Templar was owed a lot of money from the King of France and from Pope Clemente and the Church. So apparently obviously
a huge debt had amassed.
Yeah, and King Philip spoke to his friend Pope Clemente V, who were children, friends, and whatnot. Said, "Hey, listen, the people that have the power are the people that we owe the money to." And so eventually that's kind of what started the whole thing with our last Grand Master, right? Which was
Jacques de
Molay. And so in my research as well, the Knights Templar had a lot of people in very valuable places, a little bit of underground stuff, spy stuff, if you will, for lack of a better term. And so apparently Jacques de Molay knew that this was coming. And so what he did is he gathered the heads of the Knights Templar, have like a secretive meeting to discuss what's about to happen.
The Talia Barzini.
There you go,
right,
exactly.
Right.
So
that meeting of the families.
yes, absolutely.
Before the christening happened.
Yes.
So he got together.
You don't talk like a man of Mo Green like that.
That's it.
Absolutely.
That's it. So they got together. They discussed what the following plans would be, and this is also very controversial. And in my opinion, where Knights Templar went underground and dispersed themselves, at least not the higher ups, but the regular rankings, dispersed themselves into the Stone Guilds.
Right. So that's another thing that we should definitely talk about, that connection. A lot of people say it doesn't exist at all. In fact, we're going to have one of these shows, hopefully soon, we're going to have the guys from the Masonic Roundtable.
Oh, that'd be great.
They're awesome. But they have espoused, especially John and James, have espoused for sure that there is no connection at all between the Templars and the Masons.
Again, controversial for sure.
Right.
Right.
But what I wanted to talk about a little bit was we started to get at some of the stuff. Really, when they killed off Jacques de Molay, they really only arrested the Templars in France.
Correct.
So then you got to worry. Okay, there were Templars in England at the time, Germany, Italy,
Portugal,
Spain, Portugal, Malta, other places. So I mean, they were all over Europe. I mean, maybe the heads of it was in France, but there were other commanders in other areas, right?
I agree. Yes.
And so it's odd to me that they could say, "Well, the Templars just disappeared after that." Like there was a lot of them.
There's a lot
still
of them,
out
course.
there, and people say that there were Templars that weren't all fighting men. The Templar organization was huge. There were Templars that were strictly bankers. There were Templars that were farmers and growers. There were Templars that were scientists.
They had centuries to grow, so yes.
Correct. So they had, under that huge umbrella organization, there were the Knights Errant, the ones that went to fight, were only a piece of that larger organization. So, those guys were rounded up. But really, it was Jacques de Molay and two other guys that ended up being
burned at the stake.
Burned at the stake.
Right. I thought there was more than that, but
if there were, there weren't much more.
Yeah.
Right? So, so then they fled to Portugal and sought sanctuary, Knights of Christ, all that kind of thing. We started talking about that. But continue, please.
Yeah, no problem. So again, if we backtrack a little bit, if you find the ossuary as a momentous time, especially for the Knights, because at least in my research, the Knights weren't there to disassemble the church or anything like that. And if they did find that, they kept it close to the chest because they felt that the church was a good way for mankind to lead a virtuous life, right? To have morals, ethics, and values. Now, if it's based on a lie, that kind of comes into play as well, because then how much of the morals, ethics, and values can you really push forward if you're using a lie to do so, right? I mean, again, this is all theoretical. This is all just, there's so little historical text of everything that actually happened. So there are so many stories out there, as I'm sure you guys know.
Well, there'll be people like with Nazism or communism where they perpetuate a lie that they themselves believe in, and they think that that's ethical, right? So, the idea that either there is no God or that, everybody is created equal on every level, which is just not realistic, either biologically or in any other way. Other than on a soul level, everybody's equal. But outside of that, right? So, you would say... it's very interesting that. So yes, some people would tell, what is the truth? Is it an objective truth or is it a subjective truth, or a relative truth?
Yeah.
So, well, we believe this, so we're just going to go ahead and do that. So, anyway.
Yeah. So some of the research that I've done, especially with the Brothers of the East, now that's where it starts to dissolve a little bit, because the Brothers of the East, there's only so much research that can be done into them, because we're talking back around the 1st century, right? Or 1000 AD. And they go back even further. And some of the research that I've done starts to push towards an ancient civilization that had led morals, ethics, and values, and intelligence, and technology that would have to be rained down through generation after generation after generation. And so I think we spoke about this the first time I was on, the game of telephone.
Right.
If you don't have actual historical text written down and chiseled into stone, like the Kensington stone, right? Which I think was around 1178.
I think it was 13. The Kensington runestone, I think, was in the 1300s, if I remember correctly.
It's a good question. I'll look it up. Continue.
Please do. I think it was the 1100s, but regardless. So when you have a story that is carried down through generation after generation, or even centuries, or a millennia, you're going to delude the actual story that started it.
So is there any indication how old the civilization was? Without written records, it's
so
hard
again,
to
it is
surmise,
very, very
right?
hard. We do have evidence like the hammer that was encased in stone that was found in London. That's said to be 300 to 400,000 years old, when they're actually, smelting iron ore and creating hammers out of it, which is encased in a specific type of stone that would have taken hundreds of thousand years to encase it the way it did. That's just one of the pieces of evidence, because we also have all these river stones from Ecuador, which has anatomically correct dinosaurs chiseled into these stones, and there's over 100,000 of these stones, and it would take so long to be able to do that. And they have humans actually anatomically correct next to these dinosaurs on these chiseled pieces of riverstone.
So that's fascinating. Kensington runestone, by the way, 1362.
1362.
Which is after the Templars disappeared.
Yep, and it's before
50 years after.
It's before 1492, right?
Yes.
Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean
Had
blue.
not sailed the ocean blue at that time.
And found the Caribbean.
I found the Caribbean. Not Montana, where this thing was, or
Minnesota.
Wisconsin.
Kensington,
Is it Minnesota or Michigan? Minnesota, yeah. So that's another thing. I mean, the Kensington Stone is very controversial as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people refuse to take it as historical text, but they've done a ton of research into it, and the way that the roots of the tree were into the stone actually have these grooves from the roots being intertwined with it, and then we go into the hooked X.
Yeah.
Which is only a very specific time period and only from a specific place in the world. Mm-hmm. And there's only one way to explain that, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's not truth, but it's my opinion, because where are you going to get the hooked X other than where it was in Europe at the time?
Or where was it exactly? Do you remember?
I think it was the Nordish, like the Vikings and whatnot. Northern...
Scandinavian
Yeah,
sort of,
Scandinavian area, yep. That's at least from the research that I've done. The hooked X only exists there, and the runes, and that's where it came from. But now we find it in America in the mid 1300s.
Right.
Yeah, and Scott Walter carbon dated it because he's a forensic geologist.
Nice.
That's
Excellent.
who actually, and that's why he wrote his books and stated that, because he realized this inscription, because the stone was much older, clearly.
Yeah.
But the inscription with the carbon dating he did, or whatever method he used, I'm not a scientist, so we'll
I'm
take
not
his
a biologist.
word for it. Exactly.
Right.
We'll take his word for it, but he had stated it was dated.
No,
around
it's
the
very
1300s.
interesting research. It's very interesting proof as well. I mean, again, if you just take out all the aging of it and whatnot, but you look at the actual runes and the language that was used on the stone, it's very, very, very minute period of time where that existed.
Right, and then he also stated how the Newport Tower in Newport, Rhode Island.
Oh, that's another one, yep.
The keystone, if you follow that keystone in a straight line, takes you to Kensington.
Oh, that's right. They did the cross lines of it. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I've heard that. Yes. No, I have. And that's a very, very interesting construction there as well. It really is. And it lines up with, all the stars and the solstices and all that stuff.
That I find more interesting or compelling. The fact that there's a line you could draw that takes you to that
exactly.
seems weirdly far-fetched in like a way like, oh, by the way, here's some more circumstantial
right.
evidence we're throwing at this. So I don't know.
But I mean, it does line up with the solstices where the sun rises in the windows and whatnot. That has to do with a lot of our ancient, monuments and whatnot that are scattered across the world. A lot of people always lined it up with what is the stars in the universe.
Interesting.
Yeah, I do find it interesting that if you look up the Newport Tower, they think people up there are like, yeah, it was a windmill.
Oh, yeah.
It was who the hell would build a windmill with these big arches, and you have the ability to just knock it over by any kind of pull? It's like the amount of sheer force on a windmill, you would need a better structure than that. So I don't buy that. And then people think it was a grist mill or something else. It's just like, okay, sure.
I have a close brother in one of our lodges, a Masonic brother. No names or anything, but
what's his name?
His name is No Name. Brother No Name.
Brother No Name.
He got to enjoy my pyramid presentation. Mm-hmm. And afterwards he came up to me and he's like, what's more likely? It was a power source or it was, a building to hold grains. So he's totally convinced that it was a building to hold grains, and that's fine. He's obviously entitled to his opinion. That's more than respectable, but...
They thought the pyramid was there to hold grains?
Yeah.
So what? There's just barges over there. They're shooting out take the corn, baby.
Yeah, it's a little
Take
out
the
there for me.
corn, baby. You heard it here, folks. Take the corn, baby.
We figured it out.
Or wheat, or sheaf, or whatever you want to call it.
Hey, you leave your sheaf
The
away from
sheaves of wheat.
the sheaf's
my
on this
Butterford.
side and the wheat on this side. I want the happy people over here and the shiny happy people over here. I represent angry gun-toting meat-eating people.
Thank you, Dennis Leary.
That's right. So, what? At no point did I ever hear even the vaguest idea that the pyramids were ever supposed to be grain silos.
Yeah, I get it.
Pyramid chambers, burial chambers, yes. Power plants, yes. Never grain silos. That's a new one on me.
Yeah, that was a new one for me too. I mean,
never heard
actually,
that
it's not a new one for me. I've heard it from several different people before or sources, but it just doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. I mean,
Or were they giant mirrors for the ladies to do their hair?
Oh no, it was an alien spacecraft that would spin and fly to the different.
Dave did his hair there. You saw how that worked out.
That worked out great. I got to say, it looks great.
I don't know what happened. It's like it just went like the UFO hovering above.
It's aliens.
And I'm joking about the mirror, obviously.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm still deep into the research of the beginning of the Knights Templar and where it takes us from there. But as where I am now, that's most of the stuff that I've discovered, and it's very interesting because, in my opinion, some of the research that I've done, we have religious texts that go back, thousands of years that talk about a major flood myth, right? We always hear about this.
Sure,
this is a very common thing that is discussed, especially amongst, people that are interested in this stuff. So, my opinion is humans as we know it date back 100 million years. And I know how crazy it sounds. I do.
What is your evidence for this?
So, I mean, again, it's hard to have pure hard evidence, but we know...
I'm willing to take any evidence at all.
I get it. So, we have religions all across the world that all stem from different places.
Okay.
And a lot of the stories are very similar.
Right.
So, when you have an entire world population where they share the same, like I said, telephone belief because it was passed on through generation. I mean, some of the oldest texts is the Dead Sea Scrolls, Copper Scroll, all that stuff. And that's some of the oldest stuff we have, but we already know human history goes past that. So now we're talking about a great flood that impacted an entire world population. Mm-hmm. Either that or we had one specific population that had a religion that branched off into all these other religions. Those are the only two logical ideas that I can come up with from all the research done. So then when I'm looking at that, and
fair to say an antediluvian religion?
Antediluvian for sure.
Which is like pre-flood, right? So
yes.
Hogan says that the concepts within Masonry, because I'm not willing to call Masonry a religion, and I don't think anyone does.
Not, yeah.
It's what they call a handmaiden to religion, right? So it helps. It's a helper. It's a system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated with symbols. But the but the idea being that the tenets of it, to some extent, might be a holdover from a previous antediluvian religion.
100%.
Does that make sense to you?
That's kind of where I'm going with that.
Interesting. Okay.
So when I say 100 million years, well, what did this Earth look like 100 million years ago? We had Pangea. The whole land on Earth was one giant continent.
Okay.
Right? And so in the center of that continent was where Africa and South America met. Yep. And so now we fast forward a little bit, a couple million years. Now we already, if we want to subject ourselves to believe that there was a civilization 100 million years ago on this Pangea continent, dinosaurs, or at least prehistoric animals and reptiles, existed then. So now we get into the whole humans being around while there were prehistoric animals. And, megafauna, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But now we fast forward a few million years. We've already established ourselves as a society. Now we go forward a few million years. How much further can you technologically advance a society in just a couple million years, let alone a couple thousand years or 100,000 years? Mm-hmm. So now, technologically advanced, my pyramid presentation with the whole SAA and where it was located, tens of thousands of years ago. So now...
So the SAA is the South Atlantic anomaly, right?
Yep, that's correct, yes. It's a part of our atmosphere and our magnetosphere that dips down lower than anywhere else in the entire globe, which is, it exposes us to a lot of high radiation particles, solar flares, all that stuff, knocks down satellites out of the sky in space, drops them down, all that stuff. But regardless, I digress from that. So when we fast forward from 100 million years to somewhere between 100 million and 90 million years, Pangea starts to break up. Mm-hmm. Now, when Pangea breaks up, you have major floods throughout the entire planet, at least as far as they know, as far as the land goes, the Pangea continent.
Yeah.
Sure.
So now when it breaks up, South America splits off from Africa. And you're going to have major floods. That's just exactly what happened. That's provable. That's hard science and proof. And so now when that breaks up, you have your floods. And eventually, you fast forward again, a couple 100,000 to a couple million years after that. Now the continents are starting to take their place with the tectonic plate movements and everything. And so that would establish itself as a 90 or more percent extinction level event.
Well, hang on a second. So, first off, the continents aren't done moving, right?
No.
So they haven't
we're
sat
still-
in place.
we're still
They're
moving
still
today.
moving to wherever they're going eventually.
Right.
What established this event?
It was the tectonic plates that separate it from Pangea to multiple continents.
So you think it happened much more...
Not rapidly or anything like that, but when it first initially happened, it would have caused gigantic floods, earthquakes, even magma explosions of volcanoes and stuff like that. That's what happens when you have a huge tectonic plate movement. Again, scientifically proven. So when that happened, it took a while for it to start separating and go everywhere. But when it first initially happened, that's 90 or more percent extinction level event. It really is. And so I believe that's where our flood myth begins.
Interesting.
And so now after it settles, right, we have a 90% or 99% extinction level event. Mm-hmm. After the dust settles, Obviously, the tectonic plates are still moving. We're still having earthquakes, all that stuff. But, the few civilizations that were existent, the 1% or the 10% of, life that existed after these huge events happened, then rose back up and started society again. And that's where I think we get a lot of stories from the Bible and from historical religious texts and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And, and this is going to be controversial as well, but, Adam and Eve, the first two humans, right, that God created, right, in my opinion, were the first two societies that raised after the giant flood. And again, that's not in order as far as we take it from the Old Testament and the New Testament. But again, we talk about telephone. If we had 4 more people in here and we did the game of telephone, I whispered a word in your ear and so on and so forth, by the time it got back to me, it might be close, but it's not going to be the same word. We already know that. We've done this experiment several times.
Yeah.
And so now you take this huge context of history and what has happened, and you span, let's not even say 1 million years, let's say 100,000 years. Mm-hmm. There's no way that story is going to be in order or the exact same that it was back in the day.
Right.
And when you have an extinction level event, you have a very limited amount of people or life that survives after that, which even cuts that down even smaller.
True.
Interesting.
It is. It's a very interesting thing that I'm still working on, but I mean, just from all the research that I've done, it's very polarizing, obviously, and it's very interesting because it's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
100%. Just like it is
100%.
with aliens came down and put us here. That's also a possibility. But but I try to think logically. I try to use as much the scientific process and whatnot to try to get down to the nitty gritty and figure out exactly what's going on.
Right.
And so far, I still have much more research to do, much more life to live. But it's the most convincing to me, especially from all the research that I've seen.
Ooh.
And it's wild. It's very, very large concept to try to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start really thinking about it, I mean, it does start to make sense in little ways. And a ton of coincidences aren't a coincidence anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's no such thing as coincidence.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Isn't there?
There's not.
Interesting.
But, the interesting thing, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent here, but let's also look at, we just had Christmas, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Orthodox Christmas is still coming up,
Coming up.
obviously.
6th, yep.
Jan 6th.
But with that said, even the rebirth, right? It's like Jesus isn't the only story of,
Death and
kind of
rebirth.
death and rebirth mechanism.
So how many more do we know?
Well, Osiris, there's,
Osiris. You got Tammuz.
right.
You got Inanna.
Yeah.
Zalmoxis, which
got-
was the Dacian deity.
Wasn't it Dionysus too? Or
Dionysus.
Dionysus, yeah.
Or Bacchus.
Yep.
Um,
I think there's also the Roman. What was the Roman one? Trying to remember.
But again, that's
Maximus Decimus Meridius. General of the Felix Legions.
Well, there's also Baldur, Krishna, right? If you look
Yes, yes.
at. And then there's some others.
Well, that's what goes into how many different flood myths do we have.
Well, exactly.
All has to stem from somewhere.
Dave, what did
Yeah.
Krishna say to Arjuna?
I don't remember.
Eric,
I think
any
it was
ideas?
Mithras was the.
I'm not sure.
I think that was the
I'm not
Roman
super
one.
familiar.
Oh,
with
Mithras. I don't know. No, Mithras I thought was Persian deity. Anyway,
Could be right.
that. Alex digresses.
we don't know. I digress.
He digresses.
I digress.
We'll pause it.
There you go.
We haven't used that yet
Oh, that's
today.
Dave's favorite word, right?
Dave posits and I digress. Yes, absolutely. So, what were you saying? We were
So-
talking about some stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, even going further into that, there's a lot of scientific proof that shows that when the sun aligns with our
The
planet,
seventh house and,
And-
Jupiter aligns with Mars.
and, and aligns with the black hole of the center of our galaxy,
Yes.
that some weird stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
Earthquakes, cataclysmic events, and that happens every 250 million years.
Jeez.
So when you think of it like that, and we're only talking 100 million years, that's half that time.
Yeah.
So I mean, on a galactic scale and a universal scale,
And
it's not that crazy to think that 100 million years of history have passed that we've lost.
Not that crazy.
well, I know in episode 1 you also mentioned, or maybe we mentioned it off camera. You were talking about the universe is actually much older than we thought. It wasn't 13 billion years.
Oh,
It's
great. You
27
just ruined my
billion
NDA.
years.
I'll see you guys later.
No.
No, you're absolutely right.
But
absolutely.
I'm just saying, like, from a perspective, I know you theorize that civilization is much older than what we know.
We'd never want you to get in trouble about your
No,
That's
no,
enough.
of
That's
course
enough.
not. No, of course not. But all I'm getting at is, I think when you look at history, like to your point, if there's little figurines with people with dinosaurs and things of that nature, it's just like, well, how'd they know about dinosaurs back then?
We didn't discover the first fossils until the 1800s.
Right. So the question becomes, if there's drawings in caves that show you're riding a triceratops or whatever
Exactly.
it was.
Yeah, as crazy as it sounds. Yeah, absolutely.
You start questioning, and even look at the books. They've removed 14 books from the Bible. God only knows what's
More
in
than
the,
that. I think it's 127.
I think
Book of Apocrypha.
Constantine took 14 out, but I'm just saying,
Okay.
I can't imagine what history do we not know.
Exactly.
And, we could only theorize, but clearly they're hiding something, or they're not telling us the full truth, right?
Or maybe they don't even know. I mean, I was just looking at more research that in Texas, Rose, Texas, something like that, they have encased in stone dinosaur footprint. And underneath that dinosaur footprint is a human footprint.
Yeah.
That dates back millions of years ago. Hundreds of millions of years, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check. But
So the dinosaur just kicked the human. He's just like, hey!
well, there's a human footprint. Well, so again, just like
No,
fossils
understood.
happen, right?
Right.
You step in mud, and that
Yep.
mud turns to stone after a
Sure.
certain amount of time. So there's the human footprint, and then you see the tri-print of a dinosaur over it. And you can clearly tell, and there's footprints leading next to each other, like they were walking together almost.
Right.
Yeah, and you could. I guess we can share that link as well. I can share that with you guys.
Sure.
It's very, very, very convincing, because the time periods would be so much different that there's no way that a dinosaur print would be over a human footprint.
No.
There's
No,
way.
that certainly, unless there was a giant earthquake in it. There's slithering underneath there.
You can check
right?
it out right now if you're going to do a little research. I'm telling you, it's very impressive. And
Yeah, maybe we should pull that up and we'll drop it into the episode.
there's some other cool stuff that has been coming out too. So yes, like you said, the universe is said to be 13.7 billion years old. But the James Webb Space Telescope, which I worked on, has now proven that what scientists believe is that the universe is now at least 27 billion years old. And again, I don't agree with those. I don't agree with the Big Bang, because it is a theory. It doesn't explain gravity, as we've discussed before. And so the further we're going to look back, and the further back in time that we look, because the further you look in space, the further back in time you go.
Yeah.
Now we have these huge established galaxies that are much more massive than we ever thought could have existed back, 100 million years after the Big Bang, let alone 10 million years after the Big Bang. And there we go. There they are. And we've been starting to record them all. And it doesn't make sense in the sense of the science and physics that we have and based our model of the universe on. It just doesn't add up.
So we touched upon, and we didn't get deep into it, the zone of avoidance. And
Oh, yes.
you also mentioned the dipole, the great attractor, the great detractor.
Yep.
I recall from our previous conversation.
There's a very, very, very weird thing going on out there.
Yeah, so from that perspective, you're stating there's galaxies that probably shouldn't exist because they're so huge and massive. If the Big Bang actually happened when it did, supposedly.
Based on our physics model, yeah.
Right, based on the physics model, there's no
no way.
explanation for it, right?
There's no way.
So do you want to get into what is the zone of avoidance?
Oh, absolutely.
And then,
yeah.
maybe from there go into the great detractor and attractor.
Great dipole, yep.
Yep.
So the zone of avoidance is our galactic plane.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we know that we live in the Milky Way galaxy, right? Our solar system exists in one of the arms of the Milky Way galaxy. At the center of our Milky Way galaxy is a black hole, Sagittarius A. So that is basically the plane of our entire galaxy. It's like a level plane, right? So yes, some things go up and down in accordance to that level plane, So our galactic plane is where that black hole is, and everything in our galaxy revolves around it. And that's where all the gravity is attracted to. So our zone of avoidance is that galactic plane. So we are the Earth in the solar system that circles around that center galactic plane. And yes, we go up a little bit and down a little bit, but not enough to make a huge difference in searching out, the universe. So what happens is when you look at something on the other side of that galactic plane, there's so much interference from planets and stars and cosmic dust that you can't see anything on the other end. You can see above it, you can see below it, but if there's something directly on the other side of that galactic plane, we're on that plane together, so it's too convoluted to see through.
Interesting.
Okay.
So that is what the zone of avoidance is. So now we decided to use most of the large research-grade telescopes of the world to focus in on one point. And the reason that we focus in on this one point is because way out there in the universe, there's a bunch of these gigantic bodies of galaxies and whatnot that are all closing in on each other at a very, very significant rate, which isn't explained by just gravity. And so we see it, but it just happens to be that where it's all colliding into is on the other side of our zone of avoidance, which is, we can see everything going into that one point. But when we try to see that one point, it's in our zone of avoidance, of course, right? And galactic planes are different for every galaxy, 100%. And they're all shaped and angled different ways. But for some reason, our view of this great attractor is what they call it because it's only been found in the last 2 decades. So when we try to focus our telescopes at it, we can't see it. Obviously, the zone of avoidance, right? So we can see everything going in, these huge bodies of galaxies colliding into one spot, and we can call it the great attractor. But it's an anomaly and a phenomena that isn't explainable in our current physics model of the universe. So scientists got, a little tricky, and they were like, you know what? Let's turn our telescopes around to the other side of our galaxy because we are on one of the arms. And again, remember, our galaxy is massive, and there are 100 billion stars, over 100 billion planets, whatever. So now they are like, all right, let's turn around and see if we can see anything on the other side of our zone of avoidance, because we are on the outside edge, so maybe it's not that convoluted. We turn around, we look to see what we can find, because everything in the universe is propelling itself through the universe apart from each other, which is where we come up with the idea of, dark matter and dark energy, because gravity doesn't explain why we're being propelled through the universe so fast. So we turn around, we go and we look, and of course we still have a zone of avoidance. It might not be as convoluted as the other side, but now when we turn around, we can't see. But all we see is everything being pushed away from this one spot, which is located, of course, on the other side of our zone of avoidance, and pushing it all out, which we can also describe by what we see. So now they call that the Great Dipole.
So in essence, there's a giant magnet pushing everything away from it,
And
a
something else
giant
attracting
magnet
to. Yeah.
pushing or
So it would
pulling
be like
towards
it would be a north and south pole of magnet. Is kind of what it seems like.
But is there like a 1-to-1 ratio between these two things, the push and the pull, or do they pull at different?
So again, the way that we account for it is because there's something going on that other side of the zone of avoidance that we can't tell, and that is what we account for is dark matter and dark energy. Because again, we're being propelled towards the great attractor faster than gravity and everything else.
They called me that in college, by the way.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
That's what happens when you don't shower for a couple days. The great.
It becomes the great repeller.
But so they have taken into account theoretically that this great dipole is what's propelling us towards it, and this great attractor is what's pulling us towards it, which kind of counteracts for the dark matter and dark energy that we can't account for. And even though we don't know what it is, we can input it into our equations and kind of get to where we're trying to get to figure out exactly what's going on here. And beyond that, they took a massive picture of all the cosmic dust and material in between galaxies and planets. And what they find is that these dust particles, this cosmic dust, all this stuff that isn't part of a solar system or a galaxy, actually is set up in a sine wave.
Interesting.
Which is, the way that I always looked at that when I discovered that is that it's like the creators wink at us.
Yeah.
Like, that's where I am, buddy. See, that's my code right there. Which is really fascinating because...
When you say creators, Now I have to
Well,
ask.
creator, but yes.
Okay.
Whatever it is, yeah.
You talking about the ones in the upper dimensions?
So I'm talking more of the aspect of what we and everybody else that believes in a higher being as of a god or a creator of, in my opinion, the simulation that we live in. I know how crazy it sounds because when I first heard it, I thought everybody was crazy that would say it. But the further I go into my research and the further research that continues to be published and put out there, there's very famous astrophysicists that prove that we live in a simulation because black holes are holograms of themselves, holographic views of themselves. On top of that, there's a very, 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 very controversial and very interesting case where this gentleman was using some hallucinogenic and put an interference laser on a wall.
Oh, we talked about this briefly on the way up. Right, so go on.
And
please.
so he utilizes this hallucinogenic, which our body produces on its own. And when he used it, he had that laser on the wall, and he went up and he looked at it. And basically what he could see would be he's the way he explains it, and we can share this video too as well if you guys want afterwards.
Sure, that'd be awesome.
He looks through the wall, and he looks through the actual fabric of the universe. And what he sees, which is crazy, is what you see in the movie The Matrix, the letters and numbers.
Yep.
And it continues to file in behind itself, and you can see all the way through it. And so, okay, maybe that's just some guy hallucinating, right? So he starts doing this study, and he starts bringing people in. Doesn't tell him anything about it, has them take the same hallucinogenic, and then go stare at the light. And they go and stare at the light, and they describe the exact same thing. So now we're talking about a shared hallucination, which shouldn't exist. Because, you take an hallucinogenic, and I do. We're all going to see some crazy stuff, but we're not going to see the same stuff.
Well, I think...
Now, he did this over 100 times.
Wow.
And each and every time, these individuals saw the exact same thing.
Crazy.
It is crazy. It is very crazy. It is very, very... And so he's convinced that we live in a simulation. There's no doubt in his mind.
From that perspective, and you're a physicist, a genius, and clearly
I don't feel like it, but yes.
You're above our pay grade when it comes to this sort of thing. Free, obviously, anybody could be above our pay grade. But with that being said, would you say, even from a physics perspective, since everything is frequency, vibration, how would you attribute that to, how does that factor into the Matrix in a sense? Because if we're all vibrational frequencies, right? The sign, like you're saying.
Yeah.
From the
So
universe.
that's almost a limited idea of how it works. So yes, vibration, frequency is definitely a key part of it. But if we go back to the first time I was on the show, when we talked about the stick figure, 2 to 3 to 4 dimensions. So now, yes, frequency and vibration is definitely a huge key to our reality as we know it and perceive it.
Yeah.
Now, some people would say raising your frequency or your vibration to key into higher dimensions. Not sure that's exactly how it works.
Well, how does it work? Because, we talked about this on the show last time around, right? So we tried to get out of you a certain prescribed sort of way of going about it. You said meditation's good, other stuff like that.
And even you're alluding to the fact that this individual took some hallucinogenic, looked at a laser, and they're seeing through the Matrix, right? And that... So,
it's pretty fascinating stuff, absolutely. So, again, DMT is only produced in our minds and brains, right before death, when we dream, and stuff like that. So, how can I explain this? So, it's not really as much of raising your frequency and vibrational awareness. It's more the only way that we can perceive what is higher. So is through stuff like that.
Okay.
But even then, we're perceiving a higher dimension as a third and fourth dimensional being.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense to us when we see it.
Right.
And it could be as crazy as seeing who was the villain in Doctor Strange? The big guy where his face is continuously changing. I forget his name, but regardless, it's stuff that we perceive as a certain way because we can't even imagine or start to conceive what it would be to live in a fifth dimension. Because so what's the fifth dimension?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, we don't know. Right?
Exactly. We have length, width, depth. We have time. What would be the next dimension? Then we'd start talking about a tesseract.
Right.
And we can perceive the idea of a tesseract. We can even make models of it that look like it, but that's not even close to what it actually is.
And then they theorize there's clearly more dimensions above
So there's
6, 7, 8.
there's up to I think at least from the most research that I've done, and theoretically is about 12. Some people say there's 20. Some people they say there's infinite.
Yeah.
Which would really blow my mind.
How could there be infinite?
Exactly. I mean, that's what I say. It would blow my mind because it wouldn't make sense. And again, now we start getting into the whole simulation thing, right? So we could be a simulation inside of a simulation. Like the chances that we are in the base model of the simulation is pretty much very, very far from reality. So now if we're talking about dimensions, now let's talk about the fact that it could be a simulation. So now each dimension could be another base model of a simulation. And then that starts breaking down everything that you think about because it starts getting wild after that. And then if it was infinite, then we have infinite amounts of simulations, and that gets crazy. So while we know there are interdimensional beings, which I've discussed with you guys before, we know that they exist in a higher dimension or a higher level of being. They can interact with us whenever they want or not interact with us just the same way that we would interact with a stick figure, as we've discussed before. So, I mean, your guess of what the fifth dimension is pretty much as good as my guess.
Sure.
Although I've had the veil lifted up about certain things, it's still unperceived. Like, you can't grasp your mind around it because it doesn't make sense to us because we have been based in this world for so long and it's all we know. We can start researching. We can start going deeper and delve into other stuff and try to start making sense of it. But in reality, it's...
So is there any way to simulate the simulation?
So, I mean, we can create our own simulation. Then we create another base model for a lower degree of being that would live in the simulation that we created. Just think of, like, the game Sims. Right?
Yeah.
There's actually a really good movie with... Ryan Reynolds, Melissa McBride. It's called The Nines.
The Nines, okay.
It's a very, very interesting movie. It's like a B movie almost.
Yeah.
But I don't want to ruin the story for anybody, but it is a very, very cool movie to watch, which kind of correlates to the story that we're discussing right now.
Yes.
Okay.
And it is very interesting. It's very, very interesting. And I mean that's kind of where you have to say, okay, I understand, but I don't understand.
Right.
Because I mean, you have chances to try to again raise your frequency, your vibration, and try to see into that higher dimension or higher level of being or whatever you want to call it. But there's only so much we can perceive. There's not much more than depth and time that we can see.
Sure.
Or understand at least.
Right.
Yeah, you can't understand it. So.
Answer me this, though. We can't see it, right? But can we experience it on any level? Can we feel it? Or is our tactile sense different from our proprioceptive sense, let's call it?
It totally is.
Okay.
So you might be able to witness it, but to actually exist and understand it, I mean...
Yeah, that's brain stuff.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, like, spiritually, can we interact with it on a level that's... more on the ESP front? Or,
interacting, that's different. Yeah,
Okay.
Interacting, I think, is a good way to put it, and that is something that we can do in certain ways. Again, understanding it and really grasping what that reality is totally on a different level.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just it's so hard to comprehend that our brains don't make sense of it.
Well,
That's
so-
why you need the
Right.
added stuff to be able to perceive some of it.
So, a couple of things, kind of... A buddy used to say that we have more chakras than originally was anticipated. We could have hundreds of chakras, small ones that exist out here that are not actually part of the contiguous body. And I mean, there's the seven main ones, but then there's little ones that kind of bump off and such. Some of which were installed in us by the Anunnaki, if you want to think about that kind of thing. Others that, and as you gain the vibration, then these things start to light up, and then you have additional capabilities, or you have the opportunity to be added onto, like sort of a plug and play kind of thing. Like, now you're ready for the next dimension, and we're gonna plug in something into you that now you're able to interact and see that. Does that make any sense?
It's interesting. It's a little far fetched for me, but yeah, I'm not sure how accurate that would be from what I have actually been exposed to and know about. So, but I guess I understand the concept to an extent. I think that's more of like a spiritual type thing. And now, when we get into spiritual type things, I'm not sure how accurate that is to go into the discussion of higher dimensions and stuff like that.
Why do you say that? Why would you put one here and one here?
Well, because you have to. Let me try to figure out how I can explain this to you. Spiritual is a state of mind. There is a reality that has a higher dimension. So, yes, you can put yourself into that state of mind, but existing on that plane is not a human thing that we can do. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Because our bodies are meant to work here.
Well, exactly.
In this plane of existence.
Yeah.
But if matter is not created nor destroyed, right?
That's also debatable, but...
Okay, maybe...
It's a law of thermodynamics.
Right.
Well, technically, but...
But I guess the bigger question is somebody, like we have mutual friends like Brian Bowden as an example. Like individuals that have the ability to see the paranormal, speak to the paranormal.
Yeah, astral projection, right? That
right.
kind of stuff,
Now, from that perspective, if the soul's leaving the body, like, is it going to another dimension? Like, where's that energy going?
So I think that is tapping into a plane such as what you just described, but you can't... So detaching your soul from your body, that's not something that happens, I don't think, until death do us part.
Right, sure.
So... So what they're doing over in England right now is they are keeping people under a dose of DMT through intravenous and keeping them under for hours. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the DMT trip, but usually it's like a 15-minute trip, and it seems like forever. But
yes. If you're doing that's so bright. If you're doing DMT, it's 15 minutes. If you're doing ayahuasca. Then my dose of ayahuasca was 5 hours long. Some people's is 12 hours long. And so you have much greater opportunity to look around, see what's what, and all that stuff. And you have, just like with mushrooms, it keeps bringing you around. Mushrooms is kind of like, the trip is, it's like this, and then there's another one, and there's another one. There's like rings within rings of different stuff. So you get to revisit certain ideas and things that you have going on, whether it's trauma or other things, and it attacks it from different perspectives. Like, all right, let's try this. Okay, this didn't work. Let me present you with a different scenario that can help you to solve it from this position. But it's very different. Like, one is a heavenly scene. One could be a hellish landscape, having nothing to do with anything, except that on some level, that little kernel of thing that it's trying to solve is still apparent there, right? So
it's a good point you bring up. So
thank you.
I
pride myself.
Even when you're going through those experiences, you're still observing it in a 3 or 4 dimensional realm because you can't experience that high. So you might be experiencing a higher dimension, but it's still on a 3 or 4 dimensional plane. So you're having the veil lifted up a little bit, and you're able to peek inside. But you can't make sense of what it actually is, which is why you can come from different angles and try to attack that little nodule or whatever you want to call it, kernel. But to actually be existent on that level of reality or dimension is on a totally different aspect than what our minds can comprehend.
So
we're piercing the veil and being able to witness what's going on over there, but we can't actually know how that reality is existing.
something just occurred to me. Does the tree of the Kabbalah properly show all of the various dimensions?
So I'm not super familiar with the tree of the Kabbalah.
Okay.
I know I've seen it. I know of it. I haven't done much study into it, so I couldn't accurately answer.
How many dimensions are there?
So at least through my research and theoretically, I would say 12.
12 dimensions.
But again, some people say 20, some people say infinite, and so on and so forth. So again, that's more of an opinion rather than factual basis.
So you have what, 7 chakras?
Yep.
12 dimensions.
Well, again, the 7 chakras, that relates to the spectrum of light. 100%. And light is transcendent. Light exists on all dimensions and realities.
Right.
And so maybe those spectrums of light are broken down in a higher dimension. If that makes any sense. So, like, we see white light, right? We have white light right here. It's gleaming on us. It's blinding us.
Shining on my head.
But it's not actual white light. There are different spectrums of light that come together that make the white light.
So let's break it down to something, because you made the case, and I will say horse feathers to your case.
I love horse feathers.
Yes. So you said spirituality is one thing and traveling to dimensions is something else, because we're talking about. But if you take it down to the atomic level, right? The atomic level and below that, you get down to photons of light at one point, which means we are beings of light. And you yourself said that light transcends all dimensions. So if you approach it from there, then those two things would, in essence, allow us to travel to all the dimensions, not as humans, not in this incarnation.
Again, you can experience it but not understand it. That's basically what I'm saying as far as the spiritual realm and light and whatnot. So this actually is a great prelude into what we were discussing on the ride up here,
right?
Negative time that they just discovered.
But hang on a second, just one last thing on this. So,
go ahead.
If you say you can experience it, but you can't understand it. Fair enough. As humans, we can't understand.
No, definitely not.
But as the beings of light that we are, incarnated into whatever is acceptable on that level, then we could understand.
If you break it down to a molecular or...
And then reincarnate as whatever is acceptable on that particular dimension. So whatever those things are, we could be those things. Well, it's all photons, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on what belief system you have on what photons are and what they do and how they interact with what we understand as reality.
But it makes sense on some level, right? It can...
It's theoretically possible, absolutely.
Okay.
100%. 100%.
Negative time.
Oh, okay. We can go right into negative time. Sure. So scientists just recently discovered negative time.
What is that?
A lot of people want to know what negative time is, right?
Yes.
So negative time is, in layman's terms, we'll go first, is watching a car leave a tunnel 3 minutes before it even enters the tunnel.
Leave a tunnel before it enters the tunnel.
Yeah, so...
How could that be?
So we have observed photons
Okay.
interacting with atoms and coming out of these atoms prior to them actually interacting with the atoms.
Wait, say that part again?
Yeah, it's wild. So we have observed photons interacting with atoms prior to them actually coming in contact with those atoms. So like watching a photon of light go through an atom prior to that photon of light actually hitting that atom.
Right.
So how are we watching this exactly?
Like
on a TV screen? Or?
Initially, it was theoretical and equations. So now the reason they call it negative time is because when we plug in all these variables into the equation, we have a negative time variable that comes out of the other end. So you have negative time. That's why they call it negative time. But we have actually observed on a quantum or molecular level with certain types of microscopes and electron microscopes where they actually observe the photons coming out of the atom before the photon actually interacts with that atom.
Rick
I'll give you a second.
so that book I just showed you, it's the art of or the state of creativity. It's Rick Rubin's book on creativity. Fascinating book.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to reading it one day.
Yeah. So, but he talks about the whole idea of awareness must first be experienced before it is understood. And so there's two pieces of that which I think relate directly to this.
That's very cool.
So the photons experience that atom before they actually interact with the atom.
Kind of, yeah.
So the interaction happens in the time-space continuum. Well, the understanding and actual interaction with the atom happens in the time, but the experience of that atom can happen outside time-space.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's like quantum entanglement and that other stuff.
That is that
absolutely.
stuff. Yes.
So negative time would be you're dealing with time in a negative variable. Mm-hmm. So that really shouldn't exist in our equations.
Or can't you just say you're dealing outside of time?
That would be the other way to. I mean, again, in our basic model of physics, that's the best way to explain it.
No, I understand.
But yes, it could be. It could exactly. You're absolutely right.
But math, it doesn't. The math doesn't work here, right? So you're trying to explain it in a system of math that really doesn't.
Well, what it basically gives us is an irrational number, which is like a negative square root. It doesn't exist, at least as far as we know, but theoretically it does.
But what good does it do us?
Well, again, in the fact of this equation of experiencing negative time. That's why irrational numbers exist. To be able to theoretically show these equations and show what is possible. Whether we understand it or are able to prove it, we can theoretically prove it through an equation. And again, through our basic model of physics, which I've shared in the last time we were here, is based on the wrong equation for 150 years or whatnot, right?
Right.
So that's
What is physics? It was a warm day in ancient Greece. Yes.
Yeah, and
right.
in episode 1, we did put a link to that.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's very hard when you're basing your science, your mathematics, your equations on a model of principles that are limited in our base model of physics. So to be able to break through that and try to figure out other things, you have to break down the entire model of physics, which is technically broken down around quantum mechanics and that stuff, the quantum entanglement presentation that you do, the double slit experiment, which we also discussed, I think, last time we were here. And that's where the world of physics starts to break down because it doesn't make sense. It's almost as if particles are going back in time and telling themselves how to act before they are actually interacting with.
But you said time was a construct, right?
No, I never said time was a construct. A lot of people like to say that.
We kind of got into like time dilation and that sort of thing, right?
There's always a beginning and an end of everything, right?
So with time dilation, like if we were watching, I know you explained if we were watching the clock as you're flying into outer space.
At the speed of light, yes.
At the speed of light, you know, you're thousands of years old when that comes back to Earth, right?
So even if we had light speed travel, which I've discussed with you guys, I feel 100% accurate that we do. If you were to leave and go to Andromeda Galaxy and come back, that's the curse of time travel, basically, because you can go and travel at the speed of light, but you can't tell anybody about it. You get back and there's nobody to tell that you initially did it with. So you come back and you tell them what you saw, but there's nobody to tell.
But then that would be different than anti-time.
It's not that there's nobody to tell. There's nobody that you know.
You know, that's what I'm saying. So how do we...
Nobody that's still around.
So
how do we get information from the future?
We don't. But
exactly.
What can't somebody who's done it millions of years ago come back and tell us?
So now that's the tricky part, is going back in time. That's the tricky part about time travel, if you will. But again, there was a really good explanation of this.
Well, would negative time be kind of time travel in a sense, though?
It's not really time travel. That's the thing.
Okay.
But I understand what you're saying.
Because you're going to make another pocket dimension every time, right?
Well,
you're not coming back to the same timeline.
That's not exactly where I'm going with it. Oh, man, what was I just about to say? Darn it, I just forgot. It was such a great explanation of, how past, present, and future all exist at the same time. Oh, there's a really good explanation of it that I wanted to share with you guys, and it just dropped off of the tip of my tongue.
Wait. Past, present, and future all exist at the same time?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because everything is one thing. It's a singularity, right? So
Well,
we're experiencing it in the way that we're experiencing it so we can have an experience.
yeah, but so in our dimension, as our third, fourth dimension people, we experience past, present, future, right?
Right.
We're always
Right.
going forward in time.
Yeah.
But technically, time always exists at the same time. So it's part of relativity. So it's relative to your place in space or in time. So now, when you know the Large Hadron Collider, right?
Uh-huh.
We propel
CERN.
photons and protons at 99.99999% the speed of light and collide them. So when you have actual matter that's traveling at the speed of light, that shortens distances. So now it's a 17-kilometer circle at the Large Hadron Collider. Those photons are actually experiencing it as 4 meters.
Huh.
Yeah,
So wait, so if they say something's
If you collide those things, do they make noise?
of course. It's almost like an atom bomb going off.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the whole ground shakes when they do those.
Oh, crazy.
interesting.
It's put in a giant vault where they have to close these huge lead doors to set it off. Yeah.
Interesting. Dave had a question.
Well, I was just saying, if something's 100 million light years away,
If you're traveling at the speed of light, that shortens the distance for you. The way you like those photons that are going around a 17-kilometer circle, they're actually, the way they experience it is only 4 meters they're traveling.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a wild theory to grasp your mind around. Just like what I talked about in the first one, when you enter a black hole, the best theoretical idea of what happens is time and space invert on each other, which could be a higher dimension.
Inverted.
because we were inverted.
So think about it that way, right? So we walk through space and time unfolds around us constantly. So now if you inverted those two things, you'd be walking through time and space would be unfolding around you. So if you walk backwards, you'd technically be walking backwards in time, forwards, so on and so forth. Again, I think I've said this the first time I was on Interstellar, when he enters the black hole at the end of the movie.
Yep. Yeah, you mentioned that.
He's moving through time while space is continuing around him.
Because he was on the event horizon.
Yep. There you go. Look at him. We're going to make a science student out of him. He's going to be a physics major.
Well, he's got the sweater vest, so he's.
Oh, now we're talking. Now we're talking.
I just need the elbow patches. I'll be all set.
Good.
God almighty.
Yeah, so
Yes.
traveling at the speed of light with any type of matter it really shakes the world of physics up. It changes everything. Quantum mechanics. So I mean, physics is technically supposed to say everything on a macro scale is the same thing on a quantum scale. It should all act and interact the same way. So now if you dive into that, we have quantum entanglement, where there's clearly faster than light speed travel, or outside of time, like you were saying before, where two particles, when they're created together, they have an entanglement. And
Right.
no matter how far away you put those two, they can communicate with each other instantaneously.
Yep. Yeah,
That's crazy.
that is crazy.
And we also know that there are things that travel
So
faster.
is that negative time then?
So again, it's closer to negative time than time travel.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about physics giving us the model of physics that we live in, it says the speed limit of the universe is the speed of light. We know things travel faster than the speed of light because
Right.
it's a black hole. Light cannot escape because it's collapsing in on itself faster than the speed of light. So we already know that exists. How to explain it, how to put it into a model of physics that makes sense. Again, now we're talking about a higher dimension that we can't perceive or conceive. That's
Sure.
why, in my opinion, dark matter and dark energy is so intangible for us, because we can't observe it. We don't know how to yet. We might never know how to. It's a very, very confusing prospect of physics, especially from somebody in the field.
What
that
is
I'm in.
dark matter again?
Dark matter is basically the stuff we can't see in the universe that is expanding our universe at the rate it is, and it accounts for everything that we can't account for in the universe. It's something that we don't know what it is, but it exists.
That's such a cockamamie theory.
It is, it
It's
is.
so ridiculous.
So in my opinion, in my theory, I believe there are these things called, well, theoretically, there are things called tachyons,
Right.
which are particles that only exist when they're traveling faster than the speed of light. That's a theoretical particle. Mathematics prove that can exist. We can't.
Point of parliamentary procedure there, Professor.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If you... Wait, So these particles only exist at the speed of light, which means you can only observe them because they're traveling through that time space, the speed of light time
They
space.
only exist when they're traveling faster than the speed of light. So I know they can't see this, but let's say we have a line in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this line is the speed of light. All matter, as we know it, can get infinitely close to that speed of light,
Right.
but never actually go to the
Attain
speed
it,
of light.
right?
Tachyons are the opposite of that. And it can only exist and only come so close to the speed of light, but can never slow down to the speed of light.
So you're saying they actually travel faster than the speed of light?
They can only exist when they travel faster than the speed of light, yeah. It's a theoretical particle called tachyon.
And what about neutrinos?
So neutrinos is part of our basic model of matter. That's one of the smallest ones that we have. Quarks,
Neutrinos.
They're subatomic, yeah.
Do they travel that fast?
Not they can't travel if they have any mass. They cannot travel the speed of light.
Are tachyons smaller than photons?
Tachyons are a theoretical particle.
Okay.
Photons.
So theoretically, are they bigger or smaller?
Yes, theoretically, are they bigger or smaller?
Photons.
Answer the question, man.
Photons apparently have no mass, which is why they can travel at the speed of light.
and
Yeah, the
tachyons
only
the
thing
same.
as we know that travels at the speed of light is photons. But
Because you need infinite energy to travel
if you
at
have
the speed
mass,
of light.
if you have mass, yeah.
From what you said in the first
Technically,
podcast
yeah.
episode.
Which is E equals mc squared, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tachyon's a theoretical particle, is a particle that only exists traveling faster than the speed of light.
Which means it has no mass.
Or it does, and it's something that we can't perceive, like dark matter or dark energy. Now, there's another theoretical particle, and this is where my theory comes in about what dark matter and dark energy is, and they're called gravitons.
I've heard of gravitons.
Gravitons are the particle that exist on the
Yeah, from our first podcast.
the gravitational
Is that where I heard
plane.
it?
Yes.
Yeah, probably. So, the Big Bang Theory, in my opinion, exactly. My theory is that Big Bang Theory. Well, that's not even my theory, but the reason it's called a theory is because it doesn't explain where gravity came from. Einstein tries to explain that gravity is the curvature of space-time. I have a problem with that. I think gravitons, which are theoretically possible particles that exist, they're the particles on the gravitational plane, right? Like an electromagnetic plane has atoms and photons. The gravitons are the ones on the gravitational plane. And when gravitons, which are particles on the gravity plane, like a black hole, is collapsing in on itself faster than the speed of light, which we know exists because light can't escape it because it's collapsing in on itself faster than the speed of light. So in my opinion, gravitons and tachyons are the same particle. And that is what dark matter and dark energy is. And the reason why we are being propelled through space and separating from each other as fast as we are. It's a base theory that I've been working on for a little while now. And I think it's pretty close to...
But how does that? I understand how possible gravitons and or tachyons exist within the rubric of a black hole. That's a self-contained singularity that's going through this change, and that change spurs the speed of light. How does that happen outside of that particular singularity?
So I think when...
Or you're saying the entire universe is a black hole?
Well, no. I'm saying that gravitons are particles that can speed up faster than the speed of light and become tachyons and then stay in that permanent state because they can't slow down. So now we have an extra added part of our universe that technically isn't matter, but gives rise to dark matter and dark energy, which is what is separating the universe as fast as it is. The stuff that we can't account for.
But why is it doing that? Why does it have the properties of separation?
What do you mean separation?
Why is it doing what it's doing?
Because they're
right?
particles that are traveling faster than the speed of light, which is... So the universe is expanding technically faster than the speed of light. How does that happen?
What is it expanding into?
Nothingness.
What's nothingness?
Nothingness.
But wait,
Well, nothing is still something.
So there's a border of the universe, at least in our basic model of physics that we understand today. And that's only because that's as far as we can see.
okay.
Right? That's the light that travels to us at the speed of light. And, as it goes and expands further, So, as it expands further, this light's traveling towards us, but as it's expanding faster than the speed of light, that means that light will never get to us because it's going this way.
And is that where they're using parallax to figure out the blue light, red light, if I remember correctly?
Oh, that's the
or
Doppler
whatever?
effect.
Oh, the Doppler effect. Okay.
No, parallax is from
Yeah.
the Green Lantern.
Green Lantern, that's
Yes.
right.
that's-
We were talking about that before, too. But I guess you were mentioning the Great Attractor. You were saying the...
Me again?
So egotistical over here. But you mentioned how these galaxies were condensing, right?
Yeah. They're all coming to one point in space-time that we don't know what it is.
Because I thought, if we argue the Big Bang, and we know your thoughts on that, but
Yeah.
they should be actually going further away from one another, right?
Exactly, yeah. So there's something out there that has more gravity than we can account for, which might be the gravitons traveling faster than the speed of light, which become tachyons and start pulling things in like a black hole.
So when Alex and I become physicists, we're just going to make up our own shit, too. We'll be like, those
We're
are
already making up our own stuff.
Well, that's the whole point, right?
Isn't that what this show's about?
those are balls to the wall tons.
Yeah, right?
It's like, what is that? It's
Well,
like,
I didn't
made
come
them
up with the term tachyons or
No,
gravitons.
I
Those
get it.
existed long before me. Well, I don't know about long before me, but before me.
Yeah.
And the research that I've done, I mean, there is so much to start putting in. There's so many variables. It's beyond recognition and understanding. And so I try to take it logically and put together what equations I can as far as physics and mathematics go, and try to understand and comprehend and explain what the hell is going on out there.
What the hell is going on?
Yeah, that's a good question.
All right, so we talked about negative time. We talked about tachyons and gravitons. Now, if we circle back, we look at the Bellcraft, right? The Nazis, World War II,
Yep,
a
I've
little
heard
bit
of this,
before. Supposedly, the Bellcraft, my understanding anyway, was that it was supposed to be a time machine or some kind of anti-gravity device.
Yeah, anti-gravitical device, yep.
So you're saying time travel's much harder, and I think we kind of touched upon it in the first episode, but it's more or less just trying to figure out where in the universe at certain points, if you're
So-
trying to get to a point in time, you actually have to know where that existed to get there.
Yeah, it's almost like an extra coordinate that you need to account for when you're trying to travel through time. So it's easier to travel into the future than it is to travel into the past. But if you start to consider the gravitons and tachyons, things that travel faster than the speed of light, then it becomes a little more possible to travel into the past.
Okay.
Because you're moving outside of time almost. Do you understand? Just like the negative time. Although that's not time travel, it kind of shows that there is this way to maneuver outside of time. Again, a very, very large theoretical principle that has not been proven or even equated properly yet.
So why couldn't you do that? Like, let's say, I understand the point. You can't move back and forth through time. Through
You
time
should be
itself,
able to, but yeah.
because you not in this time space continuum, because you disrupt things and whatever. But if you plopped yourself outside of time and then moved yourself forward and back
You're talking
outside
about a
of the
wormhole.
actual time stream, right? Yes,
Yeah.
possibly, or even within the fabric of space, but in different areas. I think we talked about this last time, where this thing has whatever properties this bottle has, including its location. Location is part of its properties.
Right.
If you remove it here, it's technically a different bottle, because now it has a different set of properties.
And a different age.
In a different age, correct. And so that's the whole Dune idea for how the Space Navigators and Spacing Guild moved these huge ships through time. So basically, a smaller ship would all fit within the larger structure of this, let's call it navigator ship, which really didn't move. Everybody would get inside this container, and then time and space would fold around the container. The container would then pop out next to Dune or wherever Arrakis, wherever it was going to be. But ultimately, the container never went anywhere. The universe around it went somewhere,
Exactly.
and then it would pop out someplace else, and then everybody would just come out, and
Yeah.
normal time space would
And so technically what you're saying
folding
is...
space basically.
Right.
Yeah, but that means that you're traveling faster than the speed of light. You have to be, because you're folding space. Space is time. Space-time.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So, but then, are you even in space time anymore, or are you going through something else?
So again, they actually just discovered something that NASA can't really explain. That they think might be an actual wormhole. They have also found these highways of empty space that connects galaxy to galaxy and whatnot. This is just a very, very recent development. I think came out within the last month, if I'm not mistaken. And they believe that they might have found the first existence of an actual wormhole. Now, when you take a wormhole into account, that's almost like a black hole, right? So you have space-time either traveling faster than the speed of light, or you have tachyons and gravitons creating dark energy, which creates that wormhole, which again folds space and time. And then technically, what happens when you go into a black hole? Time and space
Invert
So now when you move, you're moving through
space.
Time.
while space is unfolding around you. That's exactly right. Theoretically, at least. Theoretically.
So, to your knowledge, was the Bellcraft supposed to be a time machine, or?
Apparently, it was some type of, from the little bit of research that I've done into it, an anti-gravitical craft that might be able to pop itself out of time, and I also have heard of where it landed, because they said that it apparently took off. There was a bunch of Nazis that witnessed this happen and then apparently disappeared, and this is very fascinating. And again, I don't know if it's true or not. It's just some research that I've looked into and read, but apparently I want to say in the 90s there was said to have been a aircraft in the shape of a bell that crash landed in Pennsylvania. That
In the
apparently,
90s.
Yep, I think it was the 90s or early 2000s, and they closed off the entire area. Nobody can go around it, and apparently the one or two witnesses said that it looked like there was Nazi symbolism on it.
What about the
I'll
USS?
show you guys that link too.
What about the USS Eldridge?
What, the Philadelphia experiment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So wasn't that co-location or bilocation?
so from the research that I've done on that, because that was very interesting to me. Apparently, at least from the records that I've seen, most of it being redacted and whatnot, says it never actually really happened. That the USS Eldridge was never actually in that location. Yeah, it was in, don't take my word for it, either North Carolina or Virginia the entire time.
I mean, Norfolk. You're probably better, right? 'Cause Norfolk,
Something like
Virginia's
that.
where
Yeah,
the-
it's been a
Probably.
while. Ever since I found
Probably.
that research out, I kind of dropped off into looking into the Philadelphia experiment because it was very, very interesting, and at least the stories that you heard about it was very interesting.
Very interesting.
And then when I went into the actual documents that were given out by the Freedom Act, I think it was. Again, a lot of it is redacted, but it states that the USS Eldridge was never there.
Could it be misinformation though?
It could very well, and again, there's a lot of those documents that were redacted, blacked out, that you can't read.
Yeah.
So who knows what is in there other than the people that were actually involved with it. But yeah, once I found those documents stating where the USS Eldridge was at the time of said Philadelphia experiment, it wasn't even close. It was always in that location. It was docked, and that was it.
Well, because it sounds like there's even supposedly there's a case, theoretically anyway, that a Bellcraft crashed in Italy in like the 1920s. I think it was 1923.
Interesting.
They were saying was the first time, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then, it seems like the Nazis certainly were interested in, I guess, obviously time travel, anti-gravity. But
Artifacts, all that stuff. Yep.
clearly they had the expedition to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems that, well, I guess when you look at von Braun and other
Yeah.
people,
Von Braun was a genius.
right?
Yeah.
But
That's why we took him on our side.
it seems as though, well, they had, the what was it, the Micker? What was the first? I forgot how you pronounce it. I'm not German.
What are we
but,
talking about?
The first like jet aircraft, like during World War II.
The Messerschmitts? No.
No, they had created it, but like they were light years ahead of us from that perspective, right? Well, at least a couple of years ahead.
Well, a couple of years I had.
Was it the
Not
Falcon
light
rocket
years,
or the V2?
Yeah,
V2,
exactly.
the
They had the
V3.
right, but
But let me ask this for a question. So, and it gets at your point, and then many have said that the way we interact with this universe is we sort of pull at things, the strings of the universe, and they interact with us in a certain sense, musical or otherwise, right? So, take the example of Amityville House, right, out in Long Island.
Yep.
This particular family was terrorized by the ghosts in that house. Before and after that family, that house has been completely inert. Nothing's ever happened there. So, was it something about that family that attracted maybe a breach of time-space, a breach
anomaly
of
or so?
an anomaly created, something that allowed other energies or forces from other dimensions to then interact at that point in time, and then that anomaly passed, and so there was no more further interaction at that point.
I will give you one thing.
I know this gets at some of the stuff that
Ghosts and spirits, or at least the way that we understand them or believe in them, are not passed on souls or anything like that. They are from a higher dimension, at least from what I understand.
or maybe a lower dimension.
Higher dimension.
Even the bad
You
ones?
heard it here first, guys.
Even the bad ones?
So again, we perceive it as bad. It's not really as cut and dry as that. You got to remember, like I said before, understanding a higher level of dimension is totally out there. So when you see something that interacts with you from a higher dimension, a weak-minded person could get a little nuts, or it could have an influence on you, the energy that it takes to interact with something like that. As far as what I understand, and again, what veil has been lifted for me, not really ghosts or spirits as the way that we understand or believe in them.
Do you buy the Chinese Atlas of the Moon as being real?
Chinese Atlas of the Moon? Well, I mean, they've...
So they mapped.
Well,
they say they mapped the dark
yeah.
side of the moon, and they made a whole atlas about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy all that. I haven't seen it yet. I've heard about it. I don't buy it.
Do you feel like... Why haven't we been back to the moon, do you think?
So again, it's I know a lot of people like to say, did we ever go to the moon? Yeah, we definitely went to the moon, but it's what they encountered while there. There's a new study that you just sent me about plasmoids and this, that, and the other, and that can account for certain things, but not all things. And what they say, the fourth state of life, right? They called the plasmoids fourth state of life, fourth stage of life.
Fourth stage of life.
So some of that accounts for some of it. Again, you're dealing with the higher dimension, and so when that higher dimension interacts with our lower dimension, just like we were talking about the stick figure, that's the best example I can give you. Is when they interact with us, since we don't understand it, we see it as a certain thing, and that's how you explain it to somebody. I seen this.
But do you think... Are you saying that the moon has some sort of capability that allows it to interact with other dimensions that is not available on Earth, for instance?
No, I'm not really saying that. No. What I'm saying is they seen something and found something up there, and it wasn't something they were planning for. So.
But I'm saying, was that thing up there, is it up there naturally, or was it just happened to be there and interacted in a passing sense? In other words, if we went up there again, would it still be up there?
Most likely, yeah.
So it's there permanently, in essence, or...
I wouldn't say permanently, but it should still definitely be there. 100%, I would say. I would say 99%.
Is it more of a being or more of a structure?
Or
a structure containing a being?
I guess that's the closest. Both. I would say yes to both, I guess. In a way. It doesn't really explain it, but it might give you a better hint towards it. But and this is not it by any means, but it's the closest. Think of like a Stargate.
Oh.
If that makes sense. It's not a Stargate. Don't think of it like that, but it's the closest.
It's a Stargate.
It's a wormhole, baby.
It's something that grants access between dimensions. How about that?
That sounds like a Stargate to me.
Well,
Do you,
Or the dimensional.
what about the giant pyramid in Antarctica?
oh, I don't know about that. I've seen pictures of it. I'm sure. Again, if we go back into my original theory of how long humans have been around, Antarctica was part of Pangea.
You think it's from Pangea?
Yeah, I think it's from our ancient past, our ancient history, absolutely.
But why is it that, we know governments can't agree upon anything for the most
Obviously.
part. Why is it that Antarctica has become this place that it seems like everybody's in agreement? And
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes into the whole scientific development and, the UN, I guess, agreeing that, it's pertinent for every, I guess, nation that wants to be involved in this research, go ahead and be involved in it. So there's no sovereign nation on Antarctica. Everybody has access to it, at least not everybody, but every nation that sends their people out there has access to it. Yeah, it's wild though. Antarctica is a wild place for sure. Again, if we go back into my theory about Pangea, which I totally feel I'm pretty accurate on and getting close to it. I'm still doing research and work on it, but Antarctica would have also been a part of that. And, that goes back into, I'm not sure if we said it on the first one, the Bimini Road.
Yeah.
I think we briefly touched
upon that, yeah. So I believe the Bimini Road was a road that connected all the way across Pangea. And when Pangea split up, those pieces of the road split up across the globe, and that's why we have evidence of it in Bermuda, evidence of it in Australia, evidence of it in the east coast of Africa.
Somebody was talking about the Caribbean when there was Pangea was more. I guess it was almost circular, basically, and it had pyramids all along the side. That's why they say when you have like Egypt had pyramids here, and then the Aztecs had pyramids and the Mayans had pyramids, and they all sort of line up around a certain kind of shape, in a sense, whether it's oval or something, which would mean technically then there must be pyramids in North America, because every continent have pyramids.
Oh, yeah, we already have proof of that in was it Lake Michigan, I think. I forget what lake it is. It was.
Yeah, and I thought, didn't somebody also state there's something in Alaska too? I thought that there's some kind
that I'm not totally sure of, but it could be. I wouldn't doubt it. But there is, but Aztecs was a word given to indigenous people. It was almost like not a typo, but a loose translation that was lost in translation. And apparently they came from this one further area that I forget what the name of the location was, but that's where we find a sunken pyramid in some lake.
But
it's right where the Aztecs were said to have.
Here's what I don't understand about that theory, at least with the circle you're talking about. How would all these pyramids still align with the constellations? Because, how would they have known Pangea when it broke apart? Where are we going to end up here, folks?
They don't align anymore.
Exactly.
They only align at a certain time.
I'm not saying they're completely aligned, but I'm not obviously shouldn't they be probably way off in some cases?
They are way off in some cases, I think.
As far as the constellations go, I mean, that goes into my pyramid presentation.
Right.
You'd have to flip one or the other for at least the three great pyramids of Giza to make it line up with Orion's belt. And, tens of thousands of years ago, technically could have, if it was in the same spot, 100%.
Yeah.
But think about this. Tens of thousands of years ago is still not very long ago.
Not at all.
If we're hundreds of millions of years old, what the hell were we doing all the rest of that time?
That's a good point. Well, we could have been reestablishing ourselves. And again, there could have been another cataclysmic event that restarted us yet again.
Or this could be our fourth, fifth incarnation. Right?
Exactly. It could have happened. We have evidence of 5 or 6 cataclysmic, 90% total extinction level events that we have obvious history of.
Yeah.
That is proven. And if we're talking 100 million years, now who knows how many times it could have happened. And every time we get back on our feet, we might have had to restart again.
It seems that way almost. We've been kind of screwed for a while. Like it just every time we're like another freaking asteroid hits us or something, and then it's like, but this time around, I think it's different.
Well, is it that we were screwed, or is it that we screwed up so badly that there was the reset?
So a buddy of mine was telling me, and this is a guy that did a lot of ayahuasca, so take that in stride. But he said that somehow Atlantis, because of the experiments that they were doing with dark matter, I think, or something to that effect, galvanized or magnetized to themselves so much negative energy that literally the universe around them decided, no, you guys need to be squashed, and brought a giant.
I don't know about the universe, but maybe a higher dimensional being.
Could have. I don't doubt it. I'm sure that's a possibility.
Definitely is.
What if if we go with theory, we're in a simulation?
That starts a whole nother discussion.
Could it be that they're just hitting the reset button like on a computer? It's like, you got the blue screen of death, guys. So it's like, haha, start over.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because the simulation as we understand it, or as what we think a simulation is, might not be the same way that the simulation we live in. Like, it might just appear as a simulation as we understand it because it's being orchestrated by something that we can't perceive. If that makes any sense to you guys.
Yeah.
But if you can see the white lines, if you can see the suture marks, right, where one thing is tied to another, then whatever it is, it's contrived, right? So it's here with a purpose. It's here for a purpose. It's here with a mandate, with a mission. We're supposed to interact with it in certain ways and not in other ways, right? So
either that or we're just lab mice.
Well, maybe that too.
Well, and you always give the example and story about when you were on one of your journeys, where you encountered that being, and they're just like, "We control you. You're our slaves."
Yeah, that bug thing. Yeah,
that must have been fun.
And then that was scary.
I'm sure it was.
But it was the weirdest thing because it's like you would think it'd be like, it's like, "Hey, buddy, hey." And it's like it talks like that, like some dude down the street, like, hey,
totally
nonchalantly,
Yep.
And it was kind of like trying to be all like, we got you, you got nothing. It's like kind of thing.
Puff in the chest. It's just like, we are better than you.
Yeah, exactly.
You are minuscule. You are nothingness.
He's like the White Goodman of like mantid aliens. It's just like, did Hitler get out early? Yes, it did. So, yeah.
You can even take it another step further and say that we exist for energy for something on a higher level, too. And that's the only reason. I didn't say food. You said food, not me.
I didn't say food. You said food.
But what happens if our essence is the energy that keeps the universe together?
Well, that's, in essence, the Matrix, right? I mean,
like a battery.
Okay, right.
Yeah, okay. It's not really where I was trying to get to, but yeah, no, I can see how that you could draw those conclusions from what I said. So, but yeah, I mean, it can get very scary. We've had that discussion before.
But what's so damn scary about it?
Well, I've tried to explain to you in so many ways as possible as I can, but I know you're trying to pull it out of me. Maybe one day.
Well, no, the point is not that I'm trying to. The larger point is that doesn't scare me. No. Even if we were energy to power a matrix, or we were okay. I mean, I almost take it in stride. It's like, well, if that's what it is, it's like I'm flying on a plane, right? So these people that get scared of flying in planes are like, oh, the plane might crash. Well, we haven't crashed. Like, we're here, we're doing this thing, right? So if we crash, then you don't have to worry about it because we're dead anyway. So I don't know.
But what happens after death? We don't know, right?
Well, we don't know.
Exactly.
We don't know.
Apparently, you get chained to an oar, and this mantid guy yells at you for a while. Or you go to hell.
He goes, hey, buddy.
Or you go to hell.
Hey, buddy, hey.
You go to hell, and there's a bronze plaque on the wall that's taunting you for weeks on end.
68, 72 degrees, like Paolo said.
So I mean, look. How about this? What's the scariest thing you could think of? What's something that would literally terrify you?
If there's no way out.
Margaret Thatcher naked on a cold day.
Yes. If death is not a final release into something else, if basically, and even that, I mean, like, if we're energy, then we reincarnate as something else, and you have to do this all over again, or whatever it is. I have it on good authority that is my last time around, so we'll see.
What happens if you came back as a particle of dirt and had to stay there for 50,000 years before you can get released again?
Well, if you're a particle of dirt, you have no consciousness, so I guess it really doesn't matter.
Says who?
Well, I mean...
Well, then now let's say you are a piece of dirt and you do have consciousness and you remember everything that you remember and you have to be there for 50,000 years. Does that terrify you?
I wonder what you could do as a piece of dirt.
Sit
I mean,
there
I'm
and
sure
wait.
that...
I mean, you could probably get stuck in somebody's butt crack at some point or something else. You never know.
Listen, flies eat shit, and they have no problem doing so. And in fact, they enjoy it. So I have a feeling that when you see, you're thinking, as a human, that it gets turned into a piece of dirt.
Yeah, like consciousness.
You have...
Yeah, transferred, and that would be a scary thought, though, right?
Yeah, but it's not just consciousness. It's your consciousness and your human persona.
Yeah.
Consciousness is universal. So if you're a piece of dirt... and
It's
you have
also debatable, but yes, I understand what you're saying.
Right. So, but if you're a piece of dirt and you're just hanging around, then you don't care because you're a piece of dirt. You're a fish in water. Like, why would it matter?
Well, that's the way that you understand it. But now what happens if your persona and your consciousness and everything gets transferred into that piece of dirt and you have to sit there for 50,000 years before anything else happens for you? That's not a terrifying thought?
But why do you have to sit there?
This is a total hypothetical.
Okay.
See, but I
There's
feel
no
like...
reason or rhyme of why that would happen or how it's explained. But is that a terrifying thought? To be
To me, no.
basically sitting in
That just means I get
nothingness
to
for
relax for
50,000 years.
50,000
That
years,
sounds
right?
like, actually, like, you don't have to eat. You just get to hang and you just observe. It's not the worst thing in the world.
Right.
That's a long time.
It is.
Well, yeah,
but
but
so's purgatory.
but the question
Well,
is...
that's kind of what it would be like.
But
right?
the question is, are you sitting there as dirt for 50,000 years on a human thought of time scale, or is there a different timeline when you're dirt?
Again, all hypothetical.
Like Alex is saying,
Because you
it's
wouldn't
like
be Dave Dirt or
Right.
Alex Dirt or Eric Dirt. You'd just
Joe
be dirt.
Dirte.
Joe Dirte. It's French.
fragile. Must be Italian.
No, fragile means drop hard. So yeah, that's the whole. I mean, I think if you're dirt, then you're dirt. You have the consciousness, but not the persona of Alex, the guy that's somehow turned into dirt.
Well, again, since it's hypothetical, let's say you do have the persona.
Then you do, and then you're somehow. But it would violate the understanding, I think, of a conscious universe. Because nothing would. The only place where you get to have that, and you have to sit there, as either you're in hell or purgatory, which again, you're sitting there with a purpose. So something is actually happening during that time. You may not know it or feel it or sense it, but there's a purpose why you're there. Otherwise, it's totally random and everything is random, in which case there's coincidences, there is no God. So,
What? Good.
Well, no, I was going to say, so it's interesting from all this perspective and the hypotheticals, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're more in tune with the world, you could argue probably our listeners and other individuals are, you're probably not going to fear. Because here's the thing, like even Carl Petrie was talking about, the CIA had him remote view the moon. We asked him flat out.
People doing that. Yep.
We asked him flat out, well, what was on it? He's like, I can't tell you because of my NDA. But he's like, it would scare the shit out of
your freaking NDAs.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But he said it would scare the shit out of humanity. And it's like, to me, it's like, I don't care what's there. It's like, it wouldn't bother me. Because it's just like, we're just looking for the truth, man.
Yeah.
But I think there are so many individuals out there, and maybe there's a lot of people that ignorance is bliss. They don't want to know anything. It's just 100%. Like they want to just go about their day. It's like, I don't want to know there's aliens. I don't want to know there's this or that. I think they just want to know, what did Kim Kardashian do, yesterday or whatever else. And it's like, that's their life.
Why would she do?
I have no idea. It's like, I don't follow her. But the point I'm trying to make is, I think from our perspective, like you're asking, if I was dirt for 50,000 years, okay, then that's,
Fair enough. Maybe that's not the greatest
where
hypothetical I could bring up, but
Sure.
so then let me ask you those questions.
Yeah.
What would be terrifying for you?
I can't think of anything.
Nothing, huh?
Frankly, I can't think of anything.
Okay.
Probably feeling pain forever,
Maybe.
or something
Like an eternal damnation or something?
Well, it's some kind of like Dante's Inferno kind of thing, where it's like you have to relive the same things forever. You're stuck in like this time loop.
Flesh being
where-
torn off your body
Or
every
maybe
day,
just
or-
being like in a...
Even that would at some point be like, eh.
The only thing I could think of is maybe being in like, say, a state that we're living in now, like as a human, and having nothing else there for eternity.
Yeah, so that'd be like an eternal damnation. Yeah, you'd be
Right.
left in suspension.
Yeah, like you have
forever.
nobody to interact with. There's nothing there.
Well, that's
It's
kind
like-
of what the piece of dirt type of hypothetical I was trying to get
Yeah,
to.
I get
Yeah.
that.
And it's
But I'm just saying, I don't think, if I was dirt and I knew the 50,000 years, okay, well,
well, yeah.
we'll just, I don't know what kind of proverbial pencil you could use as dirt to cross off the days, but, just watch the sun.
What about being there for an eternity then?
Well, I guess if that's, the part of
I
the
get
simulation, I don't know.
I get the being able to just be okay. That's what it is. That's what I'm gonna do. That's fine. I understand that part of it. I do.
Right.
There's more things than just being able to understand something like that to fear.
Yeah.
Than I guess you could even imagine right now.
Okay, so what's the worst fear that you have?
I have plenty of fears. I'm not sure if it counts as something that I can conjure up in my head because I've been exposed to something that I fear truly deep down. But yeah, I mean, something like eternity of nothingness would kind of terrify me in a way. Somebody else being in control of you, I guess would be another fear. Like you.
So in control, are you saying no free will, or are you saying you're a slave?
More than that. Like you're not you.
Okay. So you're just the
You
puppet.
have this idea of who you are, right? In a sense of
Yeah.
you're you, right? You're in your body, but finding out that you're not you.
But you're not you.
Right. We're in a simulation.
No. But, no, I mean, if we're honestly aspects of God,
Yeah.
and there's an overarching little skim on top of like Alex persona,
Right.
and there's the eternal forever beneath it, and you're the eternal forever that's acting out an Alex persona currently, and you get rid of the Alex persona, you're the eternal forever. So of course you're not the Alex persona.
What happens if you don't exist?
Well, if you don't exist, then you don't exist. Then what's the problem?
Your consciousness doesn't exist as you think it does.
What
That's
does
not,
it
you're
exist
asking
as?
me. You're asking me of something that would scare the shit out of me.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
something like that would scare the shit out of me. It's not what I have been shown, but you're asking me from a pure state of ignorance, not knowing what I know. That would be something that would scare me. It would. It would.
Fair. And I'm sure if
That and eternity as
Yeah.
nothing, and just having to exist without being able to interact or do anything else, and just be on my own thoughts, that would scare the shit out of me too.
I'm sure if you asked every person, what do you fear the most? Everybody will have a different answer. I mean,
Of course.
some might say it's their wife or whatever else.
Yeah.
It's like, who knows?
It's definitely not objective. yes.
Some people fear the wife.
It's like, or husband or whatever you
Yeah,
want to say.
yeah,
It's, and I'm sure there's individuals out there. They might live in fear because they're like our last guest was a combat soldier. It's like, so maybe he feared death every day or feared the Taliban attacking them or whatever. But in the grand scheme of it all, it's just like that was in that fleeting moment. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to fear that forever.
No.
No, that's a good point too. That's a good
And
point.
not to mention, if you can break through the ego barrier and attain Kensho, like we were talking about with Eric
Yeah.
Ireland, your thoughts are no longer a problem.
Right.
And so if
So
you're
yeah, thoughts wouldn't be at that point. Yeah.
if you're existing forever in a nothingness where your thoughts are no longer a problem, that sounds pretty awesome, actually.
Well, if your thoughts are no longer a problem, yeah.
Well, either way, you could crack yourself in half because out of sheer fear, but ultimately you're going to work your way out of that anyway.
So that's a good point. So I guess fear wouldn't be the right way to ask the question because eventually once it comes to a head and you experience that fear, what happens after that, right?
Correct.
Right.
You already experienced it. Now what else do you have to fear? You're already experiencing your worst fear. So I understand where you're going on the psychological basis of that for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. It's more of a shocking reality
Okay. Fair.
when you get exposed to it. It's a very shocking reality, and it's hard to, I guess, grasp and wrap your mind around it and figure out, like, either everything that we've been taught our whole lives is a lie, or none of this matters, or so on and so forth. It's more of a shocking reality that makes it scary when you start. So when it was exposed to me, I only got a piece of the information. So now my mind has to wander after everything that I've learned already. What is the next exposure that I'm looking for to get everything explained to me? So having stuff explained to me without actually having the full explanation of everything.
So,
If that makes sense.
can't you? I mean, could it be that you're scaring yourself literally for no reason because you just don't have all the information, and so you're conjecturing certain things that could be scaring you?
Yeah, that's
right?
also a
So,
fear. Yeah, that's also a fear. But the shocking reality of it is what initially creates that fear, because it's just something that you don't expect. Not even close. Like I said, it's stranger than fiction, right? It's more than you can imagine. So now we talk about the fifth dimension and this, that, and the other. We can't perceive what the fifth dimension is, so we have no idea what it is.
Right.
We have no idea what it is. So if something was supposedly lifted, the veil lifted for you, and you were able to look into that and get information about what that actually is, now you're on a step towards that understanding, and whether it be fear or shock or whatever, confusion, frustration.
Interesting.
Yeah, it builds off of itself. And again, I might not have all the information. I know the information that I got scared me to death. Don't like it. Really didn't want to know it. Especially, this is years ago now. And yeah, I was an adult, but I wasn't as mature as I am now. I didn't know as much as I do now. And yeah, man, it sticks with you. That's for sure. It definitely sticks with you.
Oh, it's understandable.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I guess the bigger question becomes, to Alex's point, it's like, is everybody just scaring themselves? I mean, and
Okay. Yeah.
clearly,
Well, to an extent, yep.
I mean, I'll give you a great example. Like, I watched the November 13th congressional hearing on UAPs and submersibles.
Pains in my ass.
And it's like, of course, it's like, well, we can't talk about that in the public, but we
Closed session.
We could close the session, talk about it behind closed doors. It's just like, all right, you're literally sitting here admitting that there's UAPs, there's submersibles that are exponentially faster than any craft we have.
Non-human biologicals, all
Right.
that other stuff. Yep.
The one thing I actually did want to ask you about that, though, and we can get into the drones and that kind of discussion in a few, but
Fair.
the biggest thing I wanted to ask you from a physics perspective,
Okay.
because I don't know this. These UAPs, submersibles, they're saying that they move and they could change directions, which would cause thousands of Gs, right?
Yeah.
So,
At least, yeah.
from that perspective, if, like, we were talking about the Tesseract or other, like an object, if it's not necessarily interacting with our time and space as we know it, would a human be able to survive that G-force if they were actually on that craft because, maybe you're not actually interfacing with this third dimension, so to speak?
So it's not as much as that. It's definitely, interacting with our dimension, right? But the whole thing with the human body being able to go through those maneuvers without being squashed like a bug, there is a part of one of the patents that I shared with you guys last time, where part of that patent is something we call a gravity wave emitter. So what essentially does is creates a bubble of gravity that you exist in that prevents you from those extreme maneuvers. Kinda,
Right?
kinda. Yeah, that's not a bad connection. I like that. Yeah.
Because in essence, you could actually use. Well, they said you could use a Merkaba as an actual locomotive
Well, yeah.
conveyance.
Yep. And again, that goes back into my research into gravitons and whatnot. And being able to manipulate that stuff changes everything.
Well, what does it have to do with pyramids? Why is it if you meditate within a pyramidic structure that somehow you can access things you couldn't otherwise?
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, like for a while they would put crystals around and people would meditate within pyramids to gather like that orgone energy. Are you familiar with orgone energy, orgone rods and
of
stuff
course.
like that?
What is the something mirror?
Black mirror?
No, that would be the device I would use to try to do what you're saying they do in a pyramid structure. It's called the Dyatlov mirror, or I don't want to misspeak, so I can't remember what the name of it is, but I will also include that link with you guys. It's a spiral, almost looks like a fractal or like a cochlear in your ear or a shell, and it's just a metal wall that circles into itself, and you sit in the middle, and weird stuff starts happening. Very, very weird stuff.
What kind of weird stuff?
You start hearing things, you get a buzz in you. People describe it in totally different ways. Again, I will share the link with you guys so you can check it out. I forget the name of the mirror.
Okay.
But it's something mirror. And for meditative purposes, they've done experiments where they put these like brain scanners on these people's head, put them in there, and yeah, they have all different physiological reactions to it. They're able to do astral projection, apparently. Yeah, it's supposed to like in tunes with you. And
does it help you to develop your psychic powers? Like, for instance, did you ever see the Silva learning method?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So they have all these various learning methods that can help you to develop your psychic powers, in essence.
Oh, I've seen this with kids, with children.
Whatever latent psychic powers you may have, this method will start to bring them out of you.
Yeah, that's something similar to that. But yeah, it's supposed to heighten your senses and your brain activity and your consciousness and technically, I guess, vibration and frequency as well.
Yeah, we definitely want to take a look at that.
Oh yeah. It's a very, very interesting piece of technology that this gentleman from Russia created, and now they replicated the experiments all over the world, and the same thing happens. It's pretty wild. That's a cool one. I'll definitely show you guys.
So have you seen... There's been a lot of talk about drones lately, obviously. Drones over New Jersey. We see them every night now. After the election...
Drones over New Jersey. We have the best drones. Some people say we have good drones. I think we have the best. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You're fired.
That was a good one. That was a good voice.
That was excellent. And...
Yeah, the drones.
Did you see there was the orb at Manchester Airport? There's been orbs reported everywhere, right? Now, clearly there's so much AI and other generations nowadays. It's hard to distinguish what reality is versus what isn't. We could also get into Project Bluebeam, obviously, where projections of granted, we haven't seen the religious projections yet with the giant Jesus in the sky or anything.
Which, to be honest, as I divulged to you guys earlier, I thought initially that's what they were planning to do with the UAPs and everything.
But
one thing I found interesting, I'm not sure, and we'll show this to our viewers as well, but I don't know if you saw this Chinese patent CN 110.857.151A.
I've heard about it. I've seen the pictures of it.
Yeah. So I pulled up the patent on Google. It's in Chinese, so kind of difficult to read for me anyway. Because you could tell I'm really, well versed in Chinese, clearly.
Mandarin,
but exactly. But with that being said, if you look at the drawings and these are depictions, it seems kind of interesting because they're actually claiming that this is a Mercury. It's Mercury, but it's anti-gravity device.
So I've heard of these thoughts about Mercury being able to produce anti-gravitical energy and whatnot.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I kind of wanted to just get your thoughts as a physicist. And
as far as the physics go, when you pass current through Mercury, it does create a cyclone or a spinning of the actual liquid metal.
Okay.
I'm not as sure that it can give you anti-gravitical properties. There is...
Anti-gravitical properties.
Would it glow?
No, I mean, the metal is... If you're putting an electrical current through it, at least. I'm not sure if they're manipulating it in any other way, shape, or form.
Sure.
But putting an electrical current into mercury, it will create a cyclone or spinning of the liquid metal. Now, there is a property, and I forget the two last names that go into it, which I'm going to have to share with you guys as well. But they came up with this thing where they utilize magnets and electrical current, and they get anti-gravitical powers. Where they can, like, I've seen these research experiments done where they literally lift objects up just on its own. Granted, they're light and very minimal structure, but once they utilize it, it really irritating me. I wasn't planning on speaking of this yet, but when they utilize the positive and negative charge, I believe the negative charge is on the bottom, the positive is on top, and then they put an electrical current through it, and it literally floats. And I forget the two physicists that actually did this project, and there's plenty of evidence of this online for all the experiments they've done. There's papers on it, and tons of different publishments of it, and it's very interesting. And what happened is the result of what happens with most physicists that come up with, technology that's going to put, electric that we buy out of business or fossil fuels, and they ended up passing in very mysterious ways.
Yes. They shot themselves twice in the back of the head.
Yeah, something like that.
Just to make sure they suicided themselves.
Yeah, they fell on an
properly.
ice pick 6 or 7 times. So.
Right, exactly.
But no, it's a great study that they did, and they birthed electrogravitics. Oh no, there it is. Hydroelectrogravitics. So they use water.
Hydroelectrogravitics.
They use water, and they use electricity, and they get anti-gravitical powers in certain structures and whatnot.
Interesting.
It's a very cool study. There's a lot of prominent experiments and data on it. And again, I will share that with you guys. We can share it with our viewers.
Absolutely.
And I think you guys will find that very, very interesting. Hydroelectrogravitics. Yep.
Yeah, because it just seems like lately, there's been a lot of glowing kind of orbs that people are seeing.
So my problem with that is the videos that I've seen of these glowing orbs. I know the one video was the lady started talking, "Oh, do you know Jesus?" And then it starts like freaking out and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's just a very high zoomed in camera view of a star or a light or whatever.
Sure.
Because like we can do it right now just as an experiment. Like we could put a flashlight over there and we can zoom all the way in on it, and it's going to look the exact same way. It's going to look like an orb that is almost like embryonic type look to it, or lines that are moving through it. And that's so my whole thing with that video of the woman that says the Jesus thing. So it's like, well, why is it freaking out when I'm saying this? Oh, well, when you talk, gases come out of your mouth, and they interfere like a mirage when you're that highly zoomed in on a light, and that's why it moves. And then when you see her stop talking, it stops moving.
Got it.
And the gas and the breath that leaves your mouth, you can't see with your own eyes, but it does interact with lights and everything else that you're looking at. And granted, there might be some videos out there that are true orbs that we can't explain. That, again, the paper that you sent me spoke about in plasmoids and other things of maybe a higher dimensional interacting with us and not actually breaking into our realm and that stuff. But most of the videos that I see of these orbs that everybody's talking about now that the drones have been over New Jersey, that's kind of what I shoot it down as.
Well, because I know there's been some videos circulating where people are seeing orbs coming out of the ocean. The submersibles, they become, they go from submersible to air or vice versa.
So liquid water is very rare in our universe. It's out there. It is. Obviously, we have it all over our...
Yeah.
I like to explain it as USOs do exist, just like UFOs or UAPs do. And the best way that I can explain it to people is, I believe that they utilize liquid water as a medium to either come down or go up in a dimension.
Interesting.
Yes,
That's
almost like a lubricant. Shh, don't say Diddy.
we're not going Diddy. It's in the Epstein.
No,
file,
but yes,
folks.
and prior to gaining knowledge that I have when I worked with NASA, I always thought they were utilizing it just like a hydrogen car would utilize water. By breaking the hydrogen and oxygen into two different molecules, you get energy from that, from breaking those molecular bonds.
Okay.
And so I always thought that they used water as like a fuel source. But I am now more along the lines of them using it as a medium to pass up or down and whatnot.
So they're using it as lube to slide into the next dimension. Not sliding into DMs. They're going interdimensional.
Yeah. It is interesting once you have that fact given to you, or not fact, but belief.
It sounds like a bad porno.
Right?
It's like
Yeah.
interdimensional sliding in.
Leave it to the fifth dimensional beings
With
man.
water.
They're freaks over there.
Very interesting.
It's like I think most ladies would argue water's not a good lubricant. But
Yeah.
Okay, on that level,
He just
but
kept
wait.
going.
I think we've.
But wait, there's more. No, I did want to ask.
One final question. Go ahead.
Well, what would you say that the drones over New Jersey are?
So again, we discussed this briefly. I thought it was a way to survey. So this is actually a really cool fact. So about a week before the news came out of all these drones over New Jersey, I was driving down Route 17 in Bergen County from Hackensack to my place in Mawa, and there was a YAL-1 flying over Route 17 back and forth and back and forth. The YAL-1, if you look it up, is the plane, military plane, with the laser on the front of it.
Okay.
And I didn't even notice it. It was my buddy that was driving noticed it, and he's like, "What the heck is that?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, it's a military plane." And then I kept watching it go over and over again. He's like, "Oh, there it is again." I figured out it was the YAL. I was like, "That's very, very weird on a Sunday morning / afternoon for this military plane to be making maneuvers like that over our area in northern Bergen County." And so then all of a sudden the following week, Tuesday or Wednesday, I finally get the first word that there's drones and everybody's taking these things, right? The videos of them. And so I originally thought it could be a huge fake sighting being planned, which I know is a little crazy. I get it. But then all of a sudden I've heard from, I forget which mayor it was, but a mayor had disclosed something to the public that there was radioactive nuclear material that was being sent into our port. And when it got here, the container that it was in was busted, and the nuclear stuff was missing. And so now I believe that the drones are looking for a nuclear signature to find out where it happened, who took it, so on and so forth, because that can be a very dangerous piece of material.
So I heard the nuclear waste theory, and from
Well, not waste, but yeah.
well, yeah, but so there's two different things going around. First, one said that there was nuclear waste
Okay.
that they disposed of from a power plant or whatever else.
Okay.
Everybody was saying it's like, well, nobody cares about that. Like, you're not going to do much with that. It might be radioactive and might cause some local disruption somewhere, but it's not going to cause any major catastrophe or anything. Then there is the theory that there's a nuclear warhead that made its way over from Ukraine, as an example, or Cold War era kind of thing.
I didn't hear warhead, but I heard of it being refined plutonium or uranium or something like that, which can be used in like a dirty bomb, or can be used in many different ways to really, really affect a population.
So the thing is, my feeling initially was that it was more reconnaissance in the Secret Service and whatever else looking in the area for any threats, because 47, as we know, President Trump will be using probably Morristown Airport again, going to Bedminster. When he canceled his trip saying, I'm not coming up this weekend, that was what? I think it was about 2.5 weeks ago now, or 2 weeks ago.
More or less, yeah.
That, to me, kind of started feeling like maybe there's some credence to this whole nuclear thing, because, why would he cancel his trip all of a sudden? And then some people on the internet, obviously, they're speculating, oh, well, it's just because it's psychological warfare. They're trying to mess with them.
I've heard
else.
that one as well, yep.
But I think if it was safe to travel up here, I'm sure he would have.
Yeah, I mean, the most convincing and most logical explanation is that, because, I mean, it's widespread, these drones. I mean, They're all over New Jersey, and now they're popping up in other places. Mm-hmm. I think that's just, novices flying their drones, trying to get on the news, so on and so forth. But again, if it was extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, it wouldn't be drones that we see like that. It just wouldn't be happening.
I was going to say, would extraterrestrials have FAA lights all over them?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, why? And the thing is, people are seeing them at night. To me, my initial thoughts were they were doing that so that VFR flight traffic would actually be able to see them.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
They're flying pretty slow and low.
But it's also easier to get the source or the sense that there is some nuclear type of material out there. You can see it better at night.
That makes sense.
But that's a scary thought if you think about it. If somebody has refined plutonium or uranium, that's not a good thing.
It's a very scary thought that there might be a dirty bomb used in this area, especially. I mean,
100%,
clearly
100%.
We're in danger here. So, in 2025, if our podcast goes off the air because of, dirty bombs or whatever.
I'm going to jump to the fifth dimension. I'll be back and I'll see you guys after.
Yeah, there you go.
No, but yeah, it is. It's a scary thought. Again, obviously the government wouldn't want to announce that's what they're doing because then that kind of gives your enemies a heads up.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, I mean, just from a logical standpoint, that's kind of the easiest explanation for now. Who knows? There might be some more developments coming out over the next weeks. And what the heck happens? Exactly. Who knows?
Yeah, because I see the drones every night. And
still, yeah.
Yeah, although the last, it was raining over the weekend, so it was hard to see anything. So I'm not sure if they were flying or not. I'm assuming they were. We just couldn't see them.
But how weird is that connection with the YAL happening literally the week before the drones started showing up?
Right.
Well,
that was very interesting.
Well, and that's the whole thing, as we said. There's no such thing as coincidence. So clearly something's going on.
Yep.
And the other night, I actually got a pretty up-close view of one of the drones because I was actually on top of not a mountain, but a hill by Berkeley Heights.
Okay.
And it came flying by. I was probably within a couple hundred feet of it.
Yeah, large, right?
It was the best view I've seen of the drones yet. But it was like a quadricopter. It wasn't anything and it wasn't a personal drone. So I was like, oh.
I seen a picture of this this unmanned helicopter looking drone.
Yep.
That seems to be
it kind of has folding wings,
yep.
So to speak. So I mean, this one looked kind of interesting, but it was I could only make out the shadow and I could see the lights blinking. So it wasn't I wanted to take a video of it, but I'm like, my cell phone will never capture anything good on here.
You'll zoom in and it'll be an orb.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody will be like, oh my God, it's a UFO. It's like, no.
It is a UFO. I've said this many times.
That's what Alex thinks, but
Why
I don't.
do people don't believe this?
Well, it's definitely a UFO. It's unidentified. So.
Right.
It's a UAP.
It's just not an interdimensional being.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not.
Just because it's interdimensional doesn't mean it doesn't have FAA lights.
What, are you trying to say in the other dimensions the FAA requires different lighting?
The FAA is a real son of a bitch.
It's called the UFFA.
It's called the Fafafui.
The interdimensional FAA.
Yes. Well, we've hit past the 2-hour mark, so we can
Nice.
we can certainly leave it here for now, and then we have more opportunities to see Eric in the next year sometime, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
People will I'm sure, very much enjoy this episode. There's been a lot of great stuff happening. And we're on Synchronicity. It's 444.
That's the one thing I forgot to say. I'm going to be working at the ELT at the end of January in Chile, and we can always do an update after that. I can tell you what I did down there. That's going to be really
That would be absolutely amazing. Do you want to just tell us what the ELT is and kind of get into whatever you can?
Is it like a BLT but more delicious?
Oh, it's so much more delicious. It's the extremely large telescope. It's the largest telescope mankind has ever made. It's massive. It's in the hills of Chile. I can't pronounce the town name, or else I would tell you. I was invited over there to help them finalize and get it up and running. I've been doing some physics and mathematics work on it to make sure that when I'm there, I'm prepared. And it's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience that I never thought I'd have again after working on the James Webb Space Telescope. But now this is going to be amazing.
Congratulations.
That's awesome.
I appreciate it.
Congrats.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
So
Yeah.
this is a regular telescope. It's not radio telescope.
Yes,
or
it's
anything?
right. Yeah,
Okay.
largest one ever made. I think it's about 136 kilometers. in diameter. It's massive. It's massive. It's going to be very cool. I'll come back with the actual measurements.
It's huge.
Huge.
And I look forward to hopefully giving you guys a brief update on that when I get back. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's just going to be staring into the abyss.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty crazy. It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
And who's building that?
So it's what's the one in Chile? I could tell you right now. One second. If I get my phone.
So it's not NASA.
It's not NASA. NASA is a joint partner in it.
Okay.
So they have helped fund it. And so has the European Space Agency.
Got it.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a very large project.
And how long are you going to be in Chile for working
A
on
week
it?
or two, depending.
Okay.
If they need more help, if
Yeah.
they're not ready to get it up and running. That's why.
Good stuff.
It is. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And I can send you guys a link on all my stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll post it in the description of the episode. And
Absolutely.
Alex and I are planning. We genuinely appreciate everybody that's tuned in this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we started out, we really had no idea, what we were doing initially. And not to say we didn't know what we were doing, but we definitely started
didn't.
taking the show in different directions.
It's been a great year for
and,
you guys. I
thank you.
appreciate being part of this, man. This is awesome.
We've really had a
Appreciate
lot of
that.
fun, and we've had some fantastic guests. Eric,
Yes.
obviously, being on twice now.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. Yes, thank you guys.
But I think we're also going to be doing some educational stuff in 2025. I know Alex is going to give us a quantum entanglement presentation. We might do some various things of that nature, plus having guests on.
That's a great
I'll
one.
have my presentation, but I'll put it up for
I'll come help you do
everybody.
the double
Yeah.
slit if you want. In
Ooh,
person.
Oh,
yes.
that'd be awesome.
Double slit.
So,
Yes, absolutely.
but
We
did
could
you
do.
did you
It's
find
the,
the
it's
name?
the it's the European Space Agency is the ones that are heading the project. So
Fantastic.
Yep.
Congrats,
Very
man.
cool.
yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Well, awesome. So more to hear then.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And with that, we will say have a wonderful and safe new year. Enjoy all that it has to offer. And until next time, we are Brothers of the Arcana. I am Alex Aldea.
I am Dave Ferrigno. God bless. Happy New Year. And
Eric Mattson Jr. I'll see you guys again soon.
Absolutely. Have a great one and safe and happy new year.